Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the public consultation for the Blackadore Key Restorative Island Project. And before we get started, I'd just like to wish God's blessings on the proceedings tonight, and we can go ahead and get into the program. Tonight is the public consultation for the presentation of the environmental impact assessment. The public consultation is a very important and vital component to the environmental impact assessment process. To go over that process with you, we have a representative from the Department of Environment, Mr. Julio Franco, who is the environmental officer in the Department of Environment, and he'll go over the process of the environmental impact assessment and also the public consultation. Mr. Julio Franco.
Hi, good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Jorge Franco, Environmental Officer from the Department of the Environment. What I'll be doing tonight is explaining to you two fundamental things. What is the environmental impact assessment process? And within that, why we are here and why it is important that we hear from you and get feedback from you. Okay? So, what is the EIA? It's not something that we decided one day that we would ask developers or investors who want in a country to do. Right? There's a legal basis for this. What is the legal basis for this? It's in the Environmental Protection Act. This act was established in 1992. And Section 21 of this act says that any development project within a country that may have a significant impact on our environment is required to conduct an environmental impact assessment. Now, there's a question that we need to ask ourselves. The Act says this, but then where is the process? How is it guided? It tells you to do an EIA. So there has to be procedures for doing an environmental impact assessment process. So the Environmental Protection Act made provision for this process. Right? And the Act in itself is defining for us what is an environmental impact assessment. And it is a process that would look at all potential positive and negative impacts of any development. These are documented, these are reported, and it allows us to determine the mitigation and preventative measures that need to be put in place. And again, an environmental impact assessment, as per the Act says, it will allow us to look at both positive and negative impact assessment. And this is all outlined, like I said, provisions made for the Environmental Protection Act of 1992, and then a process was established in the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations of 1995. What is an environmental impact assessment and what is its effectiveness? One, it is a planning tool. When you build a house, you want to know what type of house you can build based on the piece of property that you own. So you do some planning, right? And in this case, in the environmental impact assessment process, we are doing planning to make sure that the development that we are proposing is suitable for that environment in which it is being proposed in. And in doing that planning, what do? You have to do some examination, some testings. The EIA process is the same thing. It requires that you do some evaluations and some testings, but in this case, in the EIA process, you are examining, again, the positive and negative, the adverse and the positive consequences of the design of that project based within that environment, that location that you are proposing that development. And it also ensures that In designing these things, we take into consideration knowing what our negative impacts are, how we can go about preventing one, then we mitigate these things. There's a hierarchy of how you address the negative issues in regards to any development and basically in everything you do in life. Prevention is better than cure. We all know that. So there's a hierarchy that is followed: prevention, mitigation, and then we go to a new terminology that is out there: offsets. But our legislation at this stage does not look into that aspect as yet, but it's being implemented nonetheless as environmental safeguards. So the IA is effective as a planning tool in examining adverse and positive impacts, and it also addresses the issue of mitigation, preventative measures. When the developers of this project had this concept, and they presented this concept to the Department of the Environment, it went through a screening phase. Now, in the environmental impact assessment, you would know there's a definition for an EIA, and there's a definition for what an environmental impact assessment process is. So, in this process of environmental clearance, the developers applied for environmental clearance for their proposed development project. They had a concept design at a specific location, and so they made that proposal and they submitted it. The process requires that a screening be undertaken by the department. So they submitted their project proposal, it was received by the department, and the department, in reviewing those proposals with established criteria, we have these criteria in what we call an environmental impact assessment manual that looked at several issues. And in using this criteria, it was determined that an environmental impact assessment was required. Why was this impact assessment required? Because of, one, the location of which this proposed development is being considered in. This is an island development, this is a coastal development. By definition, we consider those as environmentally, ecologically sensitive areas. As well, the size and nature of the project required that the environmental impact assessment process kick in for this development. So the developers were informed of the need to conduct an environmental impact assessment. I take a pause here to educate a little bit more, because I know in our audience we have some students who would like to know more about the environmental impact assessment process, or let me call it the environmental clearance process, of which the EIA process is only part of. So in the environmental clearance process, when an environmental impact assessment is not required, it does not mean that studies are not required for us to make a decision. It just may be that there is information that is needed to make a sound decision, and based on the amount, again, based on the thematic issues that need to be addressed, it just may be that such a development will require a limited level environmental study. The environmental impact assessment process, which is guided, as I mentioned earlier, by the environmental impact assessment regulations, has two schedules. It has a Schedule 1 and a Schedule 2, and all Schedule 1 activities, it's mandatory that they do environmental impact assessments. Schedule 1 are mandatory environmental impact assessments, and Schedule 2 may or may not require an environmental impact assessment or a limited level environmental study. Now, this limited level environmental study is something relatively new. It was implemented in the amendment of this legislation, the EIA regulations, in 2007. Its difference with the EIA is in regards to the scope of work. The scope is determined by the terms of reference. So that is a major difference that we need to understand. There are development projects that are also submitted to the Department of the Environment for environmental clearance, and in the screening process, when it is determined that it's no need for an EIA based on criteria reference to Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, and there's no need for a limited level environmental study, clearance can be granted then through an environmental compliance plan and or an environmental clearance letter with conditions. I must state clearly here, the ECP in itself is not environmental clearance. The environmental clearance is a clearance letter which makes reference to the environmental compliance plan. So the environmental clearance is a letter. And all of this is within the legislation and it's defined. So for the students who are present, I hope that I've covered up to that aspect for you. Now as we continue now with what the project at hand is, the Blackadore Key Restorative Island Restorative Project, they were required to do an EIA. True, and that was done in the screening process using established criteria and reference to our Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 of our Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations of 1995, as was amended in 2007. And as I mentioned, because we required an EIA, we had to go through the scoping. So the difference within the LLES and the EIA is what is done in this exercise, scoping exercise. What does the scoping does? The scoping identifies the major environmental impacts that needs, or the major environmental issues that need to be addressed and which research and evaluation needs to be done. Some of the examples include water resources. We need to see, is there a potential for the environment to provide, or can the development obtain sufficient water resources, freshwater resources I'm referring to sustain the human development activities, as well as we need to look at water resources from the recreational perspective, as well as from the social perspective, which is the fishing industry that is in the area. So water resources is all encompassing. We also have to take into consideration the impacts to biodiversity. This means flora and fauna. How will this development impact the flora and fauna within the environment that is being proposed in? What is out there? You need to find out what is out there. What is it being used for? Who is using it? How is your development coming in and how will it affect it? And then get feedback from those who are being affected. And with any development, there are inherent environmental impacts, inherent health impacts. Where humans go, we will have inherent issues. So, what are these? These include liquid waste management, solid waste management, transportation issues. So the environmental impact assessment in the scoping for the Blackadore Key Island Restorative Projects, these were some of the major thematic issues that needed to have been addressed, and they are in the terms of reference. If any one of you had an opportunity to look at the document, you would notice that as an addendum, as an attachment to it, an attachment, the terms of reference is right there. And it outlines what needs to be provided. The terms of reference is also guided, mind you, by the legislation as well. Because the terms of reference, the legislation, determines what are the minimum requirements of an environmental impact assessment, and the terms of reference guides you in the relevant type of information to ensure that what the legislation is required is provided for. So scoping it from a wide perspective, it brings it and it narrows it down to be specific to that specific location where this project is being proposed. So, and this terms of reference is by legislation developed by the developer and is approved by the Department of the Environment. The legislation says that the environmental impact assessment cannot commence unless the terms of reference is approved. So the department had approved these terms of reference, and the developer was given the authority to proceed to prepare the environmental impact assessment report. I mentioned that the legislation clearly defines what needs to be in an environmental impact assessment. And it's being summarized on this slide for us. It requires that you have an executive summary, and the executive summary is required to be 15 pages more or less in a layman's language so that the general public, majority or most of the general public can understand and appreciate by just reading the executive summary what the development project is, where it is being proposed, what are the potential impacts, like I mentioned, both positive and negative, and for the negative impacts, how are they going to use the hierarchical preventative measures that I mentioned, which is the prevention, mitigation, and the reduction of potential impacts. So it has to do that in the executive summary, right? For any document to be an EIA as well, it has to have a description of all policies, legal and administrative frameworks that could have relevance to the project. For example, if in which we know there is to be any piers to be constructed, which Blackadore does include one or several of those, they have to discuss which legislation addresses the issuance of permits, what is the process in obtaining those permits, so that the general public in reading it would know as well. Why is it in their view? Because environmental impact assessments are also considered resource documents. You can look at those, they would give you a summary of the legislations. What we ask the developers to do is to explain the processes involved specifically with those that will have a direct impact on what they're doing. And this is beneficial for them because then they understand all the relevant permits that they need to obtain. And in the longer run, you would see when I come almost to the end why it is important for them to understand. But I'll just mention it here briefly. It's important for them when it comes to monitoring of their development projects. And I refer to it as enforcement monitoring, where they can avoid infractions of regulations by knowing what was mandated of them and doing it before they can breach any legislation. It also requires that they have a project description, what they want to do, why they're doing it, and the environment in which they are doing it. The physical environment, they need to provide us a description of where they're putting this project. And like I mentioned, they have to look at the adverse impacts, so they identify the major environmental impacts that were required and identified through the scoping process. They look at what is direct and indirect, and like I mentioned, what are significant, reversible, non-reversible impacts and the mitigation measures. A key component in the environmental impact assessment process in developing one of these reports is looking at the project alternatives. And this includes the non-action alternatives. What would happen if I do nothing? and it's compared to what are the benefits or negative impacts, what I am proposing. And it also asks you to look at other alternatives. And what if I was to do another design, another development project of a different nature within that same location? So it requires you to look at the various options and to weigh the benefits, the pros and cons, and then make a more environmentally sound decision of what type of development would go out there. Like I mentioned, it addresses the environmental consequences. It also requires that once you've identified the potential impacts, the mitigation measures, and based on those mitigation measures, you develop monitoring plans to address the measures that you're putting in place to ensure that they are having the effect that was intended, they are addressing the issue that was identified, again, to prevent or mitigate or reduce those potential impacts. The information that is gathered in the mitigation plans, these are the measures that are used in the development of the environmental compliance plan. The environmental compliance plan is a legally binding set of terms and conditions that the developer is required to comply with. Okay? The decision-making process. Now, at this stage, the developer would have conducted and addressed the issues identified in terms of reference, would have submitted a draft copy of the report to the Department of the Environment, again, legislated for in the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations. A review would be done by the Department of the Environment within 7 to 10 working days, and feedback given to the developer. The feedback is given to them in reference to they addressing the issues identified within the terms of reference and how they can improve. And if there is no need for improvement, they are asked to submit the final copy of the document. Blackadore went through this process. They submitted their report. They are at the final stages. That's why we are at this phase now. And the NIAC now is to sit and review this document. But before they can do that, we are required by the National Environmental Appraisal Committee to do the consultation first. Even though the legislation also makes mandate for the public consultation to be conducted. So the NIAC will meet to review this environmental impact assessment on August 31st. But before they meet, they want to make sure that they hear from you. They want to know what technical merits you can contribute to assist them in making a decision on the approval or disapproval or further recommendation or further studies in regards to this development project. Right? Now you've heard me say the NIAC. This is a National Environmental Appraisal Committee. Committee mandated for and legislated under the same environmental impact assessment regulations. By virtue of their positions within the identified or those expressed here, the individuals then form part of the NIAC. So the head of department for Lands Department, which is the Commissioner of Lands, forms a member of this committee or his or her alternative and so forth for that. Key to mention here is that the membership includes an NGO and a private sector partner. The current NGO partner for us is Tide, and and the private sector is BTIA, Belize Tourism Industry Association, of which they have several chapters throughout of the country, and I'm sure that they have one here in San Pedro as well. Now, the NIAC, knowing very well what the legislation calls for, and it does mention that they have the authority to request for a public consultation to be conducted, they had made a resolution in one of their meetings in the past that before they sit and review, they want the public consultation to be held before. And I guess it is very important for them to do that because it assists them in making decisions as well. So, in doing that, the legislation, and in following with the legislation, we are now having this public consultation. And the public consultation that we're having, as legislative force says, and is defined as a back and forth discussion between the developers and the general public. What are the objectives of this? It's for you to express your opinions and points of views on the project based on your local scientific and technical knowledge of the environment that the project is being proposed in that you may have, and based on what is presented to you in the report. It's to give advice, like I said, to share local knowledge, provide details and explanations, and make any deliberations that you may have. So, with that said then, when the question and answer period comes, keep in mind what I've just said and look what our objectives are. That will allow us to capture the most information from you, the most beneficial and important information that will allow the National Environmental Appraisal Committee to make a more environmentally sound decision, and thereafter making the best possible recommendation they can make to the Department of the Environment. The legislation says that the process should be open and accessible to the general public. So if anybody walked in and they feel like they were hindered from entering, let us know. Okay? Because it's like I said, it's open, it's free, and everybody can attend. We must remember that there are reasonable things also that is expected of you as a general public. So once we leave from here tonight, and once the National Environmental Appraisal Committee meets on the 31st, they are presented then with these possible recommendations that they can make by the to the Department of the Environment. The EIA is not adequate, requires additional information. There's an opportunity then given to the developer to do such. We require further public consultation. We all know that the last consultation, this was a recommendation made as well. So again, does not mean that it is the end. They can also recommend this again. But it all depends on the information that they gather from here, what is in this report that they have in front of them. That the development not proceed, they have to provide proper justification for such. Or that the development proceed subject to conditions. And this is where, if that decision is made, where the environmental compliance plan kicks in. This ECP, Environmental Compliance Plan, however, is prepared by the Department of the Environment. It's not like the terms of reference that is drafted by the developer. In concluding, and to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what the environmental impact assessment process is and the importance of it, it is a preventative approach It evaluates the expected effects that the proposed development projects may have in that specific environment in which it is being proposed. And it considers alternative designs to make sure that what you are putting there is environmentally sustainable and socially acceptable as well. Right? So I have a statement down there. Balance among development, the environment, and society. And that is what we are geared, and that is what we are mandated to do. And through the environmental process, as an environmental tool, it assists us in carrying out one of our mandates. With that, I would like to ask if there is anybody who needs any clarification on the EIA process and as to why we are here. I guess I did an excellent job, or you just didn't understand, but I hope I did an excellent job, okay? But I'll be here at the question and answers if you have any direct questions on the process, on the legislation that requires for this process to be implemented. Right? So if you have those questions are geared towards me, I'm pleased to answer that for you. And if you want, I'll be around. You could also approach me one-on-one if you need any clarifications, okay? Thank you very much for your attention.
The mayor of San Pedro Town, His Worship, Mr. Daniel Guerrero. And also, for those of you sitting in the bleachers, if there are chairs available, please, by all means, come and fill up the auditorium. Like I said, I know it may be cooler over there, but this is an inclusive process, so we want everybody involved. But as you see, there are very little available. But now that you all are aware of the process for the EIA and know what it's all about, we'll go ahead and move into the actual presentation of the EIA for the Blackadore Key project. And we have a panel of presenters who will be making that presentation this evening, beginning with Dr. Dion Chamberlain, and she may be a familiar face to some of you who work in the tourism industry. She holds a PhD in Business Administration, a Master's in Global Management, and she's been an advocate for sustainable tourism for the past 10 years. She served as the president for the Belize Tourism Industry Association and Federation of Central American Chambers of Tourism, which boasts 9 countries in that federation. As well, we'll have presenting Mr. Juan Ravallo, who is a biologist and holds a certificate in professional biomimicry. He also holds an MBA and has a Master's in Science degree pending. He is the principal for Insight and Associates, and he's been working internationally to integrate development with restoration in mind. As well presenting Mr. Dimo Pregastis, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Construction Management and Development and the Project Executive for Blackadore Key. Mr. Pregastis, by education, has a master's degree in construction management and a master's degree in structural engineering. Mr. Pregastis, by experience, is the most tenured member of the construction management and development crew, having led projects in 21 different countries and on 4 different continents. As well presenting tonight is Mr. Mark Buehrer. Mark is the founder and director of 2020 Engineering and is recognized authority on sustainable water resource management and low-impact development techniques. He is a registered professional civil engineer, author, and inventor with broad experience in engineering design, construction, and project management. Since 1995, 2020 Engineering has been dedicated to providing simple and innovative solutions for the long-term economic and environmental sustainability of local, national, and international communities. Mark has provided master planning, engineering design, and construction management assistance on hundreds of sustainable type projects throughout the world. Now, as we move into the EIA, the actual presentation of the EIA, I'd like to welcome Ms. Dr. Dion Chamberlain.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to be here, Mayor, and especially our student population, because this project, if we receive the EIA approval, really comes to life when you are ready to get into the workplace. And so it offers you many opportunities, as well as everybody else here has a significant place in this development. So every voice is as important, and we're very pleased to have all of you here because we're excited to share with you who we are, the type of developer that we are, and what this investment to the country has to offer. The reason for this EIA consultation was as a result of the first public consultation, which many of you attended. And based on the NEAC review, we were given a recommendation that it was best that we did some changes and an addendum was created. And of course, following that, we did extensive consultations with stakeholders. And again, I'm really glad to see that the Tour Guide Association and the Fishing Association, and again, all the citizenry of San Pedro took the time to be here tonight because we have engaged. And as I mentioned before, we are a different type of developer because we actually listen. We went first with the stakeholders which are closest to the key, which is San Pedro, and we spoke to people on the ground. We went to schools, we spoke to students like yourselves at Reef Week and at many different levels. And we found out what you did not like and what you preferred and what you wanted, and we actually made the changes, which proves that we are a different type of developer, the type who listens and the type who's willing to discuss, be available, and make compromises face to face. And so I thank you for coming here and being with us this way. Based on the things that you brought up in our last consultation, you asked that the outrigger structure be removed, and we're pleased to inform you that that has been completely removed. The second is that we replaced that with smaller over-the-water structure footprint, and we want to share that with you tonight to gain your feedback. The clubhouse was moved from the southern tip over water structure to inland due to information that we received from the local fishers that where it was located, that it would affect their fishing grounds. We also want to update you on the beach and shoreline erosion strategy, which is in place. Again, a lot of this was gathered from consultations with local fishermen who we believe are really the experts on the ground. We don't want to protect the environment. We want to create a world where the environment doesn't need protection, and that's why we're excited to have students with us today, because you are going to be the change that we want to see in the world. We're leaving that to you. All of us are aware where the project is, so I don't need to get into that detail, but I want you to know offhand that Blackadore is a development that seeks to restore and revitalize the ecology of an island that is in distress. And for any of you who have taken the time to go to the island, or if you look at that picture there, that shows a sick tree. Of course, we're going to get into the details of that later. However, this is going to be a revenue-generating project, but it will create a once-in-a-lifetime experience for island visitors and residents of San Pedro and the entire country, because we do realize that this project not only will support San Pedro, due to its requirements, will serve the entire country of Belize, which is why we did our consultations from north as far as Sarteneja and all the way down to Punta Gorda. We felt that we needed to share the sustainable and accountable business practices which we would be engaged in, and it forms a part of the EIA. And I'm really glad that you're here because it means that you took time to read it and digest it and see the value that it has and the fact that this investor really means business and wants to make a difference and be a part of your community. We are very interested in continuing the engagement process. So it's not only because the EIA is occurring, that's why we want to talk to you. You're going to be in our lives for the perpetuity. Employment and training of the local workforce is imperative, because what we are producing here is technology that a lot of you are not aware of, have been exposed to. And we really need to ensure that you get that training so that you can fill those roles. So again, for those of you who are considering working in tourism, there are opportunities that you've never imagined before, and we're going to be available to talk to you about that later if you'd like. We are sourcing all of our materials locally, and you'll hear about that from our partner. Demas will talk about that. And we are supporting economic, cultural, and social benefits, because when you exist in a community, you have to be a great corporate citizen. You have to show investment and involvement. And as a community, we've gone through a lot together, right, San Pedro? So we are here to show you that we are here for the long haul. What are the positive impacts exactly? The positive impacts range not only for Belize and this island. It really ranges in the fact that we want to make an example in Belize for the rest of the world to work on. Many of us feel that you recover an ecology, that you stop and you preserve. However, we understand that when things have already happened, you have to work on halting that. And so this is an example which will be shared worldwide and will be an example. Next, it does create a new revenue and economy stream for the country. Over $400 million will be developed within the next 20 years. Meaningful jobs during and post-construction at all levels. So we're talking management, technology, engineering. There's no limit to you all who are seeking education right now. Seek out the type of job you want to have, not the type of job that is available today. We want to provide education because we know that at the onset we will not have the skill sets available immediately. However, transfer of knowledge, which has already started on the ground with our international biology team, passing that down to our local biology team, is happening on the ground. Again, we will provide certificates for a train, sustain, and retain program. For many of you who know me, I'm an adjunct lecturer for UB, UE, and the University of the West Indies, and so at the very end, I will be assisting with some of that as well. We want to bring in a new quality of tourists, investors, and philanthropists. This project brings in a new level of people. It's not competition for any of you who are in the tourism industry right now. These are people who are serious that the environmental protection exists even when they travel and are on vacation. They don't put their thoughts and their beliefs and what they believe in on hold when a vacation occurs, which some of us do sometimes, don't we? We eat what we shouldn't eat when we're on a vacation, even though we say our body is the most important. Exposure for our people. Fully environmental project utilizing green technology, which is what the opportunities will be for you as students in the future. And it's a growth in tourism by an engaged and invested leadership segment. We need to shift mindsets and change the way we think within this country if we are to evolve. We have to understand that sustainable development requires development and it requires change. So then, what exactly is our conceptual design? For some of you who asked if we would have this available so you can see it in a larger scale, it's at the back of the room, so please feel free to go back and look at it. But it will include 44 resort, hotel, and guest pavilions, 36 villas and 1 residence club, Blackadore resort amenities, and arrival jetty with an education center. Some of you may ask, what is an education center for? We believe that the history and culture of this island and what it was many years ago and what it can be is an example to the rest of the world, and for your children to visit the island and learn more about it so that your history can be preserved. And we are going to be coming to you all for the information, which will be stored there, by the way. So the community involvement doesn't end here. We need you to fill the books and the walls of this historical center. Again, we'll have a main lodge, a beach club, racket club, energy and water infrastructure, which again, my partners will be describing later. So again, just to take you back to where we were when we first had the consultation, the large outrigger has been removed. And just to tell you the sheer scale of the changes, back then, that outrigger housed the Welcome Center, a main lobby, multiple food and beverage outlets, arrival pair, and operations. And it had 30 overwater guest pavilions, which were up to 2 and 3 stories high. So the footprint was 4.425 acres and larger because of the height. Today, the new design has an arrival jetty with an education center. Again, the education center remains because we hold that to be valuable to the values that we hold. Only 14 over-the-water guest pavilions are now there, and they're all flat. Over 50% reduction in size. That's what you're going to see there. And if you look at the overall square footage, it's even more. 2.9 acres, which is 33% reduction in the footprint. As I mentioned earlier, this is a developer who wants to collaborate, wants to listen, and has made the changes that you asked for. Again, because we're not going to have lots of pairs at every home or every location. It's one single pair where everybody will land at. Storage and docking with overwater structures. Like I said, one location at the northeast coast, serving the entire key. We again will have the arrival pair, the environmental education center, and the guest and service jetties, boat storage, fuel dispensing slips, and that's designed to minimize dredging, environmentally sensitive dock design, which again will be described later. For the tour guides in the area who are wondering, where do I come in this? Notice that there's no tour operations on property because you will provide that service to us by meeting quality standards and by us training you at the level that we need to with the type of technology that we're using. That is our investment in you and hopefully your investment back in supporting this project. Again, there's 7 guest pavilions on each coast as required in the overwater guidelines. We're not breaking any rules. We're following the guidelines of this country, which allows for this to occur. Again, there are clear guidelines in terms of the size of the structure for the maximum length of the sea footage, which is a maximum of 20%, and again, we are in compliance. And the footprint of the overwater structure does not exceed the 20% of the developer's undeveloped property on the northern zone. So again, this investor believes in following every rule and every guideline and every law and gaining every permit required. So let me tell you a little bit about the consultations. For those of you who are there with us, again, thank you. But it was there because we needed to connect with you. We need to find out what did we need to do to be able to connect with you. And we made a special emphasis on this zone, San Pedro. But we did Kikaker, we did Sartaneja, because again, we are going to be in that area, Corozal. And again, the entire country of Belize at the end of the day. So we had people in the immediate vicinity and secondary stakeholders. We introduced the project, told you all about it. We even offered trips and visits to the island, which many people took up, by the way. Even the media visited and went with us to see what it was actually like. And this occurred from January to July 2016. And again, we did a survey following. We shared with you what the significant changes were, and you then told us if you were supporting the project. These are the meetings with our stakeholders. For a lot of you up on the bleachers, you do remember us at Reef Week, right? And you do remember eating our lionfish at our booth, I'm sure. But again, these are the things we did, went everywhere and shared and became a part. But all of it wasn't perfect in what you told us. You told us things like, the project is not only restorative, it's financially viable. Stop saying it's not that. And we did tell you that it would bring a new revenue stream to all. You told us that there were no local experts consulted. We have been using local experts, we just didn't publicize it, and we realized we could add more. So now we have a local biology team on the ground, and we'll introduce them to you, but Kai and Val and Alejandro and many others, we want you to know that they're part of our team. We've also spoken to all VOTEC schools throughout the country to see how we can look at pulling what we're going to be doing into their curriculum, and we have plans with the University of Belize to include the Environmental Research Institute and having students come to the island and do their thesis based on what they're seeing actually on the ground. The overwater structure, like I mentioned, has been removed. But besides that, when we visited Hol Chan Marine Reserve, Miguel Alamia told us, yes, you're using the SMP and the AGRA system, but why don't you talk to the fishermen on the ground? Because they're the ones who really know. They know which fish is located where, and they're the experts. And then you can pull that together. They're giving you scientific expertise on the ground, and you're pulling it out of your data and your studies. Let's pull that all together, and that's what we did. And we came up with a Blackadore social mapping exercise where we know what type of fish is located at each level or area, so that made us change our plans and put elements at different areas where it would not affect the fishing grounds, because indigenous fisher folk deserve respect and they need to have their livelihood, and that is what makes San Pedro authentic and exciting to have our tourists visit. So then you mentioned affecting livelihood. We then brought up the fact that there were more opportunities. You mentioned restricted access to the island by locals to national land. You will have public will have complete access to the public areas that are a part of Blackadore. There are going to be private homes, but all public areas will be given public access. Several of you mentioned that when we started to bring in more people, because yes, we're going to be hiring up to 1,000 people at the highest peak. And you mentioned that could put a strain on your medical, on your school, that you didn't have the infrastructure for that. And so we said, you know, when we're going to study that, and we're going to work with you, and we are going to mitigate that by ensuring that we have a plan to fill that gap. You mentioned our biomass waste as well as our waste disposal during the actual construction phase. And I'm pleased to tell you that our specialists will speak on that further, because we do have that in place as well. You mentioned no economic value to community, as only low-skilled jobs are typically offered. We're providing managerial jobs, we're providing training, we're providing certification, and it's at many different levels. In fact, I believe that our biologists, and even myself, can tell you that we're not doing just any job. We're being used for the value that we can provide. You mentioned the literal reforestation and mangrove, and again, our specialists will speak to that on how we will be creating the structures that would improve the erosion of the coast, which has been prevalent and has made Blackadore not be the pristine island that people have said it is. Blackadore is in need of help, and we'd love to share with you after this some of the photos and all of that so you can see exactly what Blackadore looks like. But based on all of that, we had done a questionnaire directly after the first consultation, and we got some guidelines. There were 7 open-ended questions. So following that, we did a focus groups, we spoke to many people, and then we did a second survey. And the survey was post us speaking to over 5,000 people countrywide. Of course, over 60% of that population was done in San Pedro. Again, 100 surveys were collected and 87 completed, but I want you to know that all 5,000 people got the opportunity. It was a survey monkey. We sent out the links, we shared it with you all in emails, and I'm sure that many of you can attest to that fact as well. There were 8 Likert type questions, strongly agree to strongly disagree, and these were the results. 87% support. And for that, we believe that this project shows that the public is interested. So that is the social assessment aspect, and I'd like to now introduce my partner, Juan Rovalo, who is our lead biologist that can give you more of the concrete data in reference to the ecology. Juan?
Thank you very much, Dion. So, hello everybody. I'm happy to be here for the second time. I'm very happy to see many young people, mainly because this project is for all of you, for dreamers and visionaries. Some of you have already heard this information, but many of you haven't, so please stay with me, be patient, and kindly respect everybody that hasn't heard this information yet. So in regard of the physical environment, Blackadore Key is located in the Corozal Bay and is closest to Suab, Deer, and Rosario Keys. It was created by the deposition of sediment above a Pleistocene limestone ridge and by the action of mangroves and subsequent particulate sedimentation. The natural evolution and succession of a key implies that these mangroves start to sediment, accrete some sediment, until it is enough to host another kind of vegetation, giving opportunity to the coastal forest and then littoral forest, and even some deciduous broadleaf forest individuals. Nowadays, Blackadore has no mangrove at all. It has been depleted of the mangrove and only have one single white mangrove on the western shore. And this, plus the shape itself of the Blackadore and the position in the bay, raise the risk and exposure of Blackadore in terms of the natural environment and massive storms of hurricanes that have passing through Belize. Massive soil loss have happened in Blackadore, and massive coastal erosion and topsoil erosion has happened throughout the years. Since 2013, the first time that I came to start making the first rapid ecological assessment, we set up an erosion pole, and since then, 2013 to date, we have lost almost 8 feet of land. Now, many of you will say, well, but the coastlines are very dynamic and they come and go and all this, but I'm not talking about sand. Sand inside the bay and the coastline, for sure it comes and goes. A storm, we take it away, and then a storm, we put it back in. But I'm not talking about sand. I'm talking about the basic foundation of Blackadore, which is the same foundation found in Rosario, in Deer, in Suab, and many other keys, is this gray, whitish clay. very, very fine, and that was deposited there by the action of the mangroves many years ago. When that basic substrate is lost through erosion, then it's lost forever. There is no biological system nowadays that can put back that again. When that is lost, it's lost. So these almost 8 feet of shoreline that has been lost, they're lost forever. And that sediment is floating all the way in the bay, forming this beautiful sand flat that many of you take advantage of and have prime brown fishing, right? After 2015, the surrounding waters of Blackadore became part of the extension of the Whole Chan Marine Reserve. And as you know, if you see, you can see the pointer. No, you cannot see it. Blackadore is located south to the wildlife sanctuary that goes all the way up to Sarteneja and Corzal, and southwest from Bacalar Chico National Park. The Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan recognized Blackadore as suitable for development, and its surrounding waters are visited today by commercial and sport fishing, as you know. The shape of the key, thin, long, and almost aligned north and south, as we said, increases the exposure to the influence of climatic and marine events. The addition of a very long history of human use and extraction of resources from Blackadore has lowered its resiliency and its natural capacity to spring back after a hurricane or a big storm hits Blackadore. So the combinations of all these factors are components in our understanding of the current ecological conditions of Blackadore. The current soils of Blackadore are of two types. A very fertile soil, topsoil, that is just kept together by the roots of the remains of the littoral forest, just in very thin lines across the east and some patches in the west shore. And this soil is well drained, oxygenated, and as I said, very fertile. It is a soil that was formed after many years of mangrove action and could host this littoral forest and broadleaf forest on top of it. When that is gone away, the substrate is exposed, and it is this very thick clay, gray, whitish, marl-like soil. Very poorly drained, very poorly oxygenated, hypersalinated in some areas, and as you can imagine, very, very low fertility. This gray substrate is the base of this case. It is, as I said, put together by the action of mangroves through hundreds of years or thousands, and following mineralization and accumulation of organic matter, another vegetation could host that. When the topsoil is gone, this is exposed, the erosion continues, and it is lost. So the main currents from north and northeast, and the wave action is wind-driven, coming usually from east and northeast, occasionally with strong impacts from storms coming from north and northwest. These storms have created the whole erosion in Blackadore due to its low resiliency. So the purpose of the baseline, these are repeated, sorry for that. Okay, the purpose of the baseline is first to obtain enough data to understand the current ecological conditions of the key and surrounding waters. With that, we can comply with the requirements from the DOE, as you heard before. And on top of that, it will set the foundation for the restoration process and ecological performance monitoring that will happen in the future. So all these studies that the developers have supported is not only to pass the DOE, the EIA, and that's it. It is a baseline for the future. We will monitor the performance of key indicators in the whole ecosystem, and we will report how those performances are doing. Are we raising the carrying capacity? Are we raising the biodiversity? Is the stability is raising? The resiliency is raising? Do we have a more healthy Blackadore or not in the future? So since in 2013, we visited with a small team to make a fast assessment in Blackadore, and from May 2015, I have been coordinated an extended group of specialists, including professional ornithologists, herpetologists, botanists, mastozoologists, marine biologists, remote analysis experts, and GIS specialists, gathering data from key biological groups. On top of that, soil analysis has been made, and water quality has been also assessed, not only on the surrounding waters of Blackadore, but also in interstitial sampling points on the site, on the land on Blackadore. Other studies include the coastal erosion assessment, the offshore sediment analysis, and crab population assessment. We know that the conditions, the ecological conditions in Blackadore reflect a disturbed ecological structure. Many of you have visited recently Blackadore. Some of the NEAC panel, we visit together the site, and you have from first hand this knowledge. It is a vulnerable key with depleted resources in a constant degradative process. But nevertheless, the species found on Blackadore and surrounding waters still express the potential for restorative actions. All those little spots that you see on the images, every one of those little dots, it's a place when we conducted a registration for some of the key groups. Either we put a Sherman trap to assess small mammals, or we put a mist net to assess birds and bats, or we made crab sampling and measurement, or we made transects of vegetation or quadrants, or we take samples on the water or on the land, each one of those dots. You can see almost the entire Blackadore. Through these 27 species of fish were recorded around the island, mostly on the northwest sector. Commercially important grunts, snappers were the most represented. We found some species associated to typical reef environments like parrotfish, surgeonfish, butterfly fish, angelfish, sergeant major, were found mostly in the north and southwest points. Barracudas, yellowfin mojaras, snappers, and stingrays are found all over the island, and sport fish like bonefish and permit were spotted at the zone of high current activity both on the north and south ends of the island. Even though the northwest side has the most density to it, the overall total fish density on Blackadore is considered low. Around 90% of the fish registered on the island were juveniles with less than 20 centimeters long, and 50% of those were under 10 centimeters long. So there's a lot of fish, mostly juveniles in them. Macroalgae is a dominant benthic species, but it's sand and silt that cover almost the entire seafloor, with seagrass around Blackadore with a very scarce patches, as you can see in the images to the upper left. In terms of the terrestrial flora, we assess the 4 types of vegetation with different types of transects and quadrants. We assess species identification, height, spread, DBH, condition of them, substrate, applying the methods of a rapid ecological assessment, and no botanical species at risk were found. Nevertheless, it is considered that the littoral forest is at risk in Belize, since all the development in the coast tend to cut it down. 30 species of plants were found, and it is known that the soil erosion, salinity, and blue crab population maintain a degradative feedback loop in the island. Nevertheless, this depleted structure hosts a very diverse fauna component in the land. Birds, reptiles, and mammals were assessed in Blackadore. For the bats and the mice, the guidelines of the American Society of Mammalogists were applied. We found 3 species of bats, 1 species of mice that you can see in the picture. Birds were assessed following the methodology, applying the Field Methods Manual for the monitoring of terrestrial birds. We found 64 species of birds, 60 throughout the year, it's important to say, and 60% of them are migratory. So Blackadore is an important stepping stone on the migratory path of birds also. You can see the near threatened species of the white crown pigeon, the wood thrush, and the black catbird over there. For the reptile population, we use a combined standard methods. We're using drift fences, pitfall traps, random sampling, funnel traps, intensive search, and 8 species were only recorded. One of them, the boa over there, anoles, geckos, tree snakes, and in the EIA, it says that no amphibian were found until last week that we found one coastal toad. For me, it's a big news. I know it's. The program of Blackadore will occupy the 25% of the area of the key, and the rest of it will be devoted to restoration and conservation. The pre-identified impacts derived from construction will be expressed further in following slides, but I can address the following. We're going to identify relevant species and individuals to be protected during the construction. Most of them will be transplanted and placed on a on-site nursery, where we will be also propagating native species, and the structure and composition of the revegetation will also come from our restorative principles. The carrying capacity of the key, as well as diversity, abundance, and stability, will be elevated. A dedicated group will be trained in order to manipulate any fauna, species, or individual that will be encountered during the construction process, and it will be properly manipulated, taken care of, and is necessarily allocated in other places. In order to minimize the impact derived from the construction will also follow a phasing process in order to identify the valuable areas, minimize the access points, create the nursery, and have control over the crews around the island. First of all, the nursery will be established. I don't know if you can see here in the northern sector. Only 3 entry points will be activated or established on Blackadore. The 3 of them on the west side. From the center, the construction will start working south, and when that process is finished, the revegetation will occur, and only then 2 other entry points to the north and south will be implemented in order to complete the construction of the site. What we are trying to address with this process is to keep the island alive. We are not working in a coastal line where you have land on each side and behind you. We are on an island, and that creates a whole different complexity. So we need to address this in a phasing time so certain species can move and adapt, can migrate to one side and another, and then come back to the revegetated place. In terms of the archaeological findings, we have proof that Blackadore has been used since many, many years ago. We find some Mayan shards and pottery, net sinkers. This assessment was conducted in adherence with the National Institute of Culture and History. And during the excavation, if any remains are to be found, a professional excavation will be arranged with them. Up to now, there's no permanent structures of the Maya over there. Only, it was a fishing post like many other places here. That's not my slide. In order to address geology, roads and drainage, water transportation, disaster and emergency management, I pass the mic to Mr. Pragastis here from CMD. Thank you very much.
Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Talk a little bit about geology. Oops. I'm missing some slides, I think. I'm sorry. I'll get it right. All right. As part of the 2006 EIA, was an extensive study and a borehole examination that was conducted. Subsequently to that, there was a study and borehole examination that was conducted earlier this year. And the surrounding area for Blackadore was extensively studied by the Geology Department of the University of Wichita in Kansas in the U.S. All three studies and investigations have consistent results. And what you see here is, in terms of the morphology, the island is fairly flat in terms of elevation grade. So the difference between the lower and the higher elevation is less than a meter. If I remember correctly, it's about 70 centimeters. However, when you look at the cross-section, which is a typical cross-section of the island, you see a concave configuration here. As a result of that configuration, water accumulates, and you have areas that are waterlogged from water that comes from storm surges, and through evaporation that results in a very high salinity water that is present on the island. And this is particularly pronounced as you go from the north of the island to the south. This diagram here tries to show the poor drainage that is existing. So as a result of all this, drainage is going to have to be fixed. The way to fix this is we're going to have to import Thank you. We're going to have material in addition. You guys can hear me? Yeah. So in addition to that, all spoils from excavation and dredging, which I'm going to talk about later, are going to be utilized on site in conjunction with the imported fill to grade the site properly. In terms of structural foundation system, all the structurals are going to be very lightly loaded, so the preferred option right now for foundation is micropiles. Remind you, as Juan touched a while ago, there are two distinct layers. There's a layer of topsoil, which varies in thickness anywhere from 6 to 8, 9 inches. It's pretty much organic material, is root mats and sand. Below this, there is a layer which is about 22 to 36 inches, varies in location, if I remember correctly on the numbers, is wet plastic, white color clay, which is the product of decomposition of and weathering of limestone. In terms of sourcing of construction material, and I'm only addressing some of the major materials, sand is locally available, both river sand as well as white sand, which is mined from the savannas. There are local suppliers who are going to be utilizing both types of sand for the construction of the project. Softwoods and hardwoods will be sourced from suppliers that comply with FSC requirements. They are available here locally. In terms of stone and rock in various gradations, there is available product. Cement is primarily imported from Mexico and Guatemala. However, there are locally available wholesaler suppliers. We intend to utilize them. There is going to be a staging area that will be located off island. That staging area will incorporate prefabrication yards. The intent is to prefabricate as many components as we can for the structures in conjunction with utilizing panelized wall systems wherever we can to minimize the impact on island. Instead of having that fabrication happening on island, we're gonna fabricate it off island and ship that material prefabricated. In terms of transport of materials, obviously there is going to be direct impact from loading and unloading of barges in and around the docks. However, the identifiable direct impacts on the immediate island's vicinity from loading and unloading on vessels I think are going to be minimal. Despite the fact that the waters near the shoreline are shallow, as you will see momentarily, the construction access docks are located in areas where there is deeper water, and that should minimize and alleviate some of those concerns. Potential impacts include damage to seagrass. We are of the opinion that this is going to be minimal in the area of the specific construction docks, just because the area proposed for those locations for the docks contains almost no seagrass beds, as well as no patch reefs. So we believe there is going to be only minimal, if any, impact relating to that. In terms of displacement of sediments and resulting elevated turbidity levels, I think that is an impact that can negatively affect marine life forms. However, it will be addressed through proper standard mitigation processes. In terms of possibility of releasing oils from the operation of the barges, that is also an impact, but in our view, that can be avoidable by proper operation and maintenance. So what I'm trying to refer to here is what the slide shows. Minimal impacts on the mitigation is going to consist of following existing channels for passengers and freight transport, use vessels in proper operating condition, verify and map presence and distribution of seagrass beds. As I said, in the specific location where we envision having the temporary construction access docks, there is no grass beds or reefs. Guiding lighted buoys to mark approved navigational routes will be utilized. There's going to be an ongoing restoration, including growth of any new aquatic vegetation that may be impacted. In terms of dredging, this is what we envision doing for access during the construction stage. And mind you, there is an existing dock which is located, is a stone and concrete dock that has dilapidated. Right now we're in the process of obtaining a permit for repairing that. And that existing pier has been servicing all access to the island up to date. It is in bad need of repairs. It is unsafe for utilization right now. As I said, we are in the process of obtaining a permit for that. Besides that, we're going to be utilizing two construction access areas with temporary docks. One is going to be in the middle of the island. The other one is going to be in the southern portion of the island. Those are the only areas that dredging will be required. Based on the size of the barges that we envision utilizing for construction access and temporary access, I cannot read the number from here. I believe it's 8,814 cubic yards. This is the estimated total volume of dredging. And by dredging here, the specific areas, there is The bedrock is very high, almost visible to the bottom of the sea, so there's going to be what I refer to as dredging is primarily going to be excavation with minimum dredging. So obviously, anytime you do dredging or undersea excavation, there is going to be negative impacts, primarily because of the turbidity and sedimentation, which are resulting from your dredging activities. However, as I said before, we are of the opinion that those impacts are going to be minimal for the following reason. First of all, the area where we're envisioning having the construction temporary access docks is homogeneous in the sense that is sand and mud in terms of the sea bottom. There is almost no healthy aquatic element. There is no seagrass, and there is no reefs. In addition to that, and I will elaborate on that in a minute, we will utilize what is known as a biomimicry principle in designing the foundation system and the pier itself, which is, in an essence, is you try to emulate what Mother Nature is doing, as an example, in the mangrove root system, utilizing the same configuration when you design and install the foundation system for the docks. In so doing, you can almost generate a, should I say, unnatural mangrove root system, but that's the philosophy. In terms of standard mitigation responses for dredging, it's all the typical stuff. Mechanically contain the sediment plume using from the excavation process by deploying sedimentation curtains. You're going to have sealed curtains, monitoring of equipment, velocity reduction measures, buffles, decreasing the time frame when you do the actual dredging, perform the dredging during calm sea conditions, and configure the burrow pit in such a way so that there is no steep walls to aggravate and propagate any additional sedimentation. So. In terms of transportation, there is not going to be a conventional roadway in the island. There is access from the north to the south for pedestrians and electrical cars only. It's going to be provided by means of a pathway. The pathway is going to be constructed out of natural materials. It's going to be sand and or gravel or combination thereof, and clay. The island, as I mentioned before, has poor drainage, and that drainage has to be fixed. Proposed drainage solution is going to include the restoration of the coastal areas, importing fill so that proper elevations are utilized for grading in a positive way so that any water that does not accumulate in the low-lying areas of the island instead finds its way into the sea. Currently, the only access is predominantly by water. There is limited helicopter access. In terms of, when somebody thinks in terms of mitigating measures pertaining to roads and drainage, in our case, as I said, we're not going to have a traditional road in the island. However, there's going to be boat access to and from. So somebody then can start thinking about potential watercraft impacts, and there are going to be direct negative navigational impacts and risks from operation of water vessels around the island. operational measures involving regulations and signage in nearshore waters, indicating boat speeds, approved navigational channels, etc. Education for all boat operations to and from the island, and all watercrafts will be required to maintain safe operating distance from other water vessels and proper visible identification during day or night, as well as collision warning systems. In terms of potential risks and relevant mitigation measures for fuel tanks and fuel dispensing, there are going to be two fuel storage tanks on island. The first one is going to be for gasoline, approximately 2,500 gallons, capacity for motorized boats, and there is going to be a diesel tank, 9,000 gallon storage capacity, which is based on a 5-day demand for the emergency generators. So there is a potential impact of, leaks. Mitigation measures incorporate fuel dispensing for backup generators, will be carried only by trained individuals, and the fuel storage tank is going to consist of a double wall containment storage tank. In addition to that, there is going to be a concrete spill containment, which is going to be sized for 110% of the volume of the tank. The water transportation chapter of the EIA deals with the following. Water transportation needs during construction and operation phase, boat storage and docking facilities, pier construction, fuel storage, beach protection devices, and overwater structure. So I'll touch bases briefly on these. In terms of needs, there is definitely going to be need for transportation via vessels during the construction phase, designated and marked approach channels for all 3 temporary access points that I discussed earlier. In terms of the long-term, meaning during the operational phase of the project, there's only going to be a single access point or location, which is going to be the combination of the service and the arrival jetties on the east side in the northern portion of the island. There is a reason and a rhyme as far as the location of the proposed service and arrival jetties, as well as the proposed location for the temporary docks during construction. That has to do with minimizing the dredging based on the existing depth of water in those locations, as well as the lack of seagrass in those particular locations. In terms of needs as far as vessel types and configuration, they are listed here. I'm not going to take too much time on this. Overwater structures, as other presenters have shown, the massive outrigger that was previously in the project has been completely eliminated. All we have is 7 over-the-water structures that are located on each side, 7 on the east, 7 on the west side of the island. The configuration is indicated in this slide. What is important here to state is that the overall length of the overwater structure does not exceed the guideline of 20% of the total length of the sea frontage, and the footprint of the overwater structure area does not exceed 20% of the developer's undeveloped property in the northern zone. Very quickly, just touching bases on the potential impact and mitigation of the overwater structures. Again, the foundation system and the support system for the over-the-water structure is going to follow a biomimicry concept. Again, what you're trying to do is emulate what Mother Nature has done. In this particular example, You're trying to imitate the root system for a mangrove and utilize the same principle and configuration for the foundation design for the over-the-water structures. And in doing so, you can increase aquatic population and also provide shelter for the existing fish. You see some of the impacts and some of the proposed mitigations there. In terms of beach erosion and Rama structures, the island, for those of you that have had a chance to visit it, has a serious erosion problem that continues in a rather accelerated manner. So we have experimented with several methodologies as far as what we can do to minimize this shoreline loss, if you would, and provide adequate protection against erosion. The first thing that we did is we experimented with organic triage. What I mean by that is have bundles that are packed together and consist of bundles of salt grasses and palm fronds, and place them in the areas that were undercut already by wave action. That did not work in the long run and could not sufficiently withstand the hydraulic scour, especially under a significant storm event. Subsequently to that, a temporary coastal erosion methodology was implemented, which consisted of a temporary dry stack limestone rock revetment that was constructed in the areas that had the most of the damage, primarily in the northern part of the coastal area. Although this initially seemed to work adequately and there was sand accumulation behind it, further to consultation with both the biologists and our coastal engineers, we realized that the preferred solution is going to be an ecosystem-based adaptation strategy, which includes mangrove ramas configuration and underwater jetties placed in parallel with the coastal line that you're trying to protect. And this is what is shown in this portion of the slide, which you see a typical Rama configuration, underwater structure. So that would be our preferred configuration for systems and methodologies for protecting coastal erosion. In terms to direct and indirect biological and physical impacts and the corresponding mitigations, those are standard. I'm not going to take too much time, but they are identified on this slide. Disaster and emergency management plans will be developed and implemented by the development team and will be addressed the major disasters that can be foreseeable. Those plans will consist of and address specifics pertaining to responder training, coordination of training with local and national response teams, site-specific safety orientation training for all workers. Those are going to be, for those of you that have not seen them, those are big, thick, comprehensive manuals that provide a full emergency preparedness plan down to nitty-gritty details. The 5 major potential disasters that have been identified as possibly affecting the property and operations include hurricanes and tropical storms, fire, fuel oil spills and leaks, medical and sea level rise, and they will be having their own individual and specific to that disaster response plan. So with that, and I apologize for taking more time than I had in mind, but I would like to introduce my colleague, Mike Buer, who is going to be addressing issues pertaining to water resources, solid and liquid waste, and a couple of other things. So with that, Mark.
Damos. This on? On? Use this? Is this on? Hello? Oh, hello. As Juan mentioned, I just wanted to quickly say I'm really happy and impressed that there's a lot of students and young adults here. I'm a civil engineer, and if you get interested in anything I talk about water resources, the world is in need of good civil engineers and civil engineering technicians. So think about this. There's good career opportunities out there all over the place, as well as there's going to be opportunities on a project like this to help in the operations of these kind of systems. I have to go quickly through a lot of information. Go through the slides here. So this will be a 21st century type of design. When we talk about sustainable water resource management, one of the themes we talk about is there's no such thing as waste. I don't even like to use the word wastewater, but through this presentation I'll have to use it because that's still kind of the common terminologies you'll hear often talked about when it comes to wastewater. That needs to be turned off. Great. The other themes about doing sustainable water systems, we talk about closed loop systems. We use and reuse the water resources. We also have very integrated water systems conveying different types of water. The other theme of this type of project and other sustainable projects we work on in different parts of the world, we have no discharge of wastewater from the sites. All the water gets used and reused on the sites because it's a valuable resource. The two main categories of water we talk about potable water. That's the water that's used for drinking, cooking. That water needs to be pure and safe for drinking. But non-potable water sources include gray water, black water. If you treat any of those kind of wastewaters, then it's called reclaimed water. And those are really good for uses like in toilet flushing, irrigation, things you don't need to have drinking water in. So these are all parts of the types of water systems we're going to be implementing that are be part of this water system, starting with the rainwater harvesting through a vacuum system that will convey all the wastewater to the treatment system. We're going to use a natural wastewater treatment system. I'll share a little bit about that later. Once that's treated, that water now goes back for reclaimed water, goes back for flushing the toilets. In a lot of buildings, over 80% of the water that's used in a building is flushed down the toilet. So why should we be using that, our potable supply for that? The balance of the water that's not used back into the buildings will be used to irrigate the landscapes and part of the restoration plan. So we'll have total use of all the water and wastewater in a what's kind of considered a closed loop cycle. Some of the potable water that's collected and stored in the cisterns and treated will go in the south end of the site where the homes are. They'll have a slightly different method of treating their black water. The vacuum toilet systems will vacuum to advanced composting systems, so the human waste and the nutrients in that will be composted very thoroughly and be available for fertilizer in the landscapes. The gray water within those systems will be treated in simple systems, and those will be reused to flush the micro-flush toilets. And the balance of that water goes back into irrigation for a complete closed loop and reuse of all the water sources that are collected and used in the project. To get rainwater to the point that it's acceptable for potable uses, this is an example of some of the very simple systems that can be used. Starting with screen filters and other type of filters that we put before the collection cisterns because we want to keep the cisterns clean as possible. Once the water is collected and stored in the cisterns and it's drawn through additional treatment trains like slow sand filters, and then we use ultraviolet light for disinfection. We try to keep chemicals such as chlorine out of the system because of their toxic materials that they can produce too. And that provides very high quality of water for all the drinking water needs. Another piece of the plan for this project, because it is in such a remote area, we've developed a backup plan just in case you guys go for a month or two without rain and we start going low on our cisterns. We have a backup plan using solar distillation. There's two main types of systems that may be implemented. One is what I call the high-tech system, which concentrates the heat from the sun and creates the energy and power needed to separate out the salt from the water. And that has a small footprint that could be located most likely in the north part of the island. Or there could be condensation traps that are very simple, low-tech technology that can be implemented and put on roofs next to the solar PV panels, and that can produce continuous flow of water as needed for a backup system for the potable system. Some of the other alternatives we looked at, reverse osmosis. It's becoming more commonly used to take seawater, process it, take the salt out. It's a very high energy demand system, and it also produces a lot of brine or salt that has to also be dealt with. Well water is another potential source of potable water. It comes from the ground. A well will have to be drilled to extract that water from the ground. And then a third alternative would be to just transport the water to the island in large storage tanks, and that would take a lot of effort, energy, and expense. And the nearest place to get that water would be San Pedro, and San Pedro needs their own water to use to support its community. So some of the mitigation measures, some of the concerns that came up, impacts potentially insects, contamination of water perhaps from roof collection, and that's handled through mitigation of through design. We have screens and filters, like I mentioned, keeping everything clean in the storage, and then we filter and disinfect the water prior to uses. Rainwater harvesting really doesn't have an impact because the island has lots of water that falls on it regularly, and through our water and reuse system, we're going to collect the rain water. Less than 10% of the water that hits the island is all we need to provide all the water we need. And all that water eventually gets put back through irrigation systems, so it really kind of has a net zero impact on the collection. Solar distillation, if it's used, it's really a backup. You know, it may never need to be used, but if it is used, it may have some concerns with the salt that would be produced, even though it would be a small amount of salt, because most likely it'd only be running in a small amount of time, but that salt could then be dispersed in the strong currents of the island, or it could be diffused through diffusion systems offshore, or deleted with the fresh water. It could also be just dried out and used for salt cooking and seasoning for uses. Preferred option. So on the north end of the island, the preferred options mentioned earlier is the ecologic wastewater treatment system. And the south end is a combination of gray water treatment, reuse, and advanced composting systems. And just to note, we've moved into the liquid waste category and chapter of the EIA, also known as wastewater. So you have the gray water sources, and there's light gray from sinks and showers. So when we talk about gray water, that's what that is. And we got the black water, which is the human waste from toilets and urinals, and that is used and reused, you can see, in a closed loop type of system. This will be what the wastewater system will look like in concept to serve the north end. The waste will enter through a vacuum system that will be conveyed. So every time a toilet is flushed, it gets conveyed directly to the treatment system. There'll be underground storage tanks that will take and treat the wastewater. It's called primary, secondary treatment. And then we polish it or further treat it to very clear quality using constructed wetland systems that have layers of rock media and sand that filters the water, treats it, and the plants are also put in there to add additional treatment through the root systems and the microbes that grow there. That system then produces a water that gets disinfected, and then it gets pressurized, and then through purple pipelines, all that reclaimed water goes back to the toilets and points of reuse. It's identified in purple piping so that someday it doesn't get accidentally used for a potable water source. In the south end with the homes, we have the vacuum flush toilet systems here again, being used to flush into the composting toilet bin. That bin is filled up with wood chips. The human waste, which is mostly water, goes into there, gets composted, and it takes about a year of processing in one of these until it works its way down through the pile. And then that nutrient-rich compost can be tilled back into landscapes and part of the restoration process of the island. We also looked at membrane bioreactors. They're very high energy demand for wastewater treatment. And since this island is producing its whole energy power on the island, keeping the energy system down. So all the containment and pipe, manholes and things will be tightly sealed so that they'll also be protected from any storm surges. We will design in extra storage capacity, so if there is a hiccup or a problem with a system, it'll have time to store the extra waste, and then the system can catch up and treat it. The last, this is my last, no, I got two more sections. Zero waste. This is our solid waste section now. We're going to be recycling, and the main thing to point out here is that the goal of the island through strategies of reduction, reuse, recycling, composting is to reduce 80% of the typical waste that goes to landfills from a typical resort area. And as a last resort, the disposal goes to landfills. And during construction, there will be just as rigorous of a program to minimize any waste that needs to be hauled off the site. I won't go into too much here, but the two main things here is we've done a pretty extensive study estimating how much waste might be generated from different types of potential waste, from organics, plastics, cardboards, glass, recycled materials. The main summary of this is 70% of this is biomass. The organics and the cardboard, which can be composted on site, and that material can then be put back in as fertilizer on the island. We also looked at burying and burning, but because of the environmental impacts of that kind of process, that was not considered further. The mitigation measures include, the impact concern of contamination of water with chemicals, potential chemicals. Everything will be stored in maintenance buildings, secure, high up above storm surges. And there will also be very much of a limit and restriction of any type of really dangerous and chemical materials on the project from the start. And also with the flooding, same thing there, put in enclosed systems and kept high above for surge protection, and haul off the waste prior to the storm hitting. One last section here, just a couple of slides on the energy generation for the island. The main needs of the island are for electricity, are for lighting, cooking, appliances, computers. The only use for gas and oil would be backup systems for power generation. Other than that, it would all be generated by on-site green power. Whoops. And this slide gives the four main categories on the left of the type of potential energy generation systems that are out there. From connecting to the Belize main system would require a cable and underwater conveyance of great cost, but also environmental impact to the ecosystem. On-site engine, so you could put a power plant out there that would generate noise and power and pollution. That was kind of the cons on that one. Solar PV, it's really an abundant source. It's clean, it's reliable, it's free, it's low maintenance, little construction impact, no noise or odors, mature. And the only kind of downside is we have to store the energy in batteries to get us through the evenings when the sun has gone down. And then wind was also looked at. It is also clean energy, but there's inconsistent speed out here, and plus the visual impacts are cons that kind of put that one to the side. So the preferred option on this would be all the island's energy, electricity would be produced by solar PV, and the slide there in the bottom right will be the battery type systems that may be used to store that extra energy during the day for evening uses. Minimal impacts on the solar. The one thing, there will be operation of some backup generators again if ever needed, and that may have noise and air pollution and safety with that and the storage of fuels, and that will be all mitigated by proper design and operation. All these systems I've talked about, the design is only a piece of the solution. The operation and ongoing maintenance is as important or more important, and that's why there will be trained people involved. Almost all technologies these days have remote sensors and monitoring, so that the engineers that may even be working off island, or operators on board, will get a pop-up on your smartphone telling you that, hey, a filter needs cleaned. So all these things can be now readily maintained and kept in operating, optimal operation. So, and I'll be on the panel later, so if you got any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer them. Deanna, it's now going to close up.
Okay, yes, I'm there. Oh, I went all the way back. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Following the environmental impact assessment, which this is a part of, an environmental monitoring plan is going to be put into effect to ensure that we are complying. And these are the different categories. I won't go through all of them, but we look at things like habitat and vegetation to see if we're actually doing the improvements that we say that we are, the historical, the wildlife, the fisheries, and community and environmental health, and all of those areas. In moving on, we mentioned earlier in the consultation and also in meetings that we've had with you throughout the country as we spoke, and especially here with our consultations that we've held on the ground in San Pedro, we mentioned that we are complying with all guidelines, rules, regulations, and laws of the country. And these are some of the permits or licenses that we have started the process, that we will start the process for, and we're going to ensure that we have all of these in place. If you can see that on the screen, use of the seabed, solid waste disposal, surveys, even our arrival jetties, just like all of us now who have to get all of that for putting in their pairs. Blackadore is going to be in full compliance in doing all of this, and the monitoring and enforcement will be in place as well. Many of you may also be concerned that we've only been speaking through the January through August session because it's prior to the EIA. But I want you to know that we will take it well beyond that, and we've set up a very carefully created grievance procedure. And I don't want it to just be for grievance purposes. We want to hear from you when we're doing well, when there's suggestions that you want to make as well, and things that we need to change. So we are going to be setting up regular meetings. We will have a local consultative group. In fact, some of the different groups have already contacted us and told us that they want to be at least on quarterly or monthly meetings. Again, we will be facilitating that. Our email address that has been available since January until now will remain there and will be responded to in the same daily, timely methodology that it has been. Our phone is available and is being responded to very rapidly as well. We will place a community suggestion box that we'd like, once we have that in place, we will be having an office that we would be able to drop off that information, because we want you to log your concerns. We want to provide you with responses. We want to tell you what changes we will make. Because like I told you before, this is a different type of investor. And the only way we can prove that to you is if you give us an opportunity to do it. And you can monitor us, and we will be having these discussions well beyond the time. And we will be responding in a timely manner. And for those of you who I've responded to, and the team has responded to, you know that we are highly responsive, and we keep you updated regularly with our mass emails as well, just to let you know what's going on with the project, whether there's an issue or whether there's a success that we'd like to share with you. Because we believe in communicating face-to-face and directly, and not necessarily on mass media. The Blackadore Development Group is committed to work with Belizean people. We are excited at the opportunity. We're pleased at how much importance you placed on being at consultations like this, all of the information that you brought to us at the previous consultation, every suggestion that you've made, because you've made us a better developer. We don't want to be a good developer like one of the guys told us earlier this week when we consulted. You guys are a good developer. We want to be the best developer. We actually want to be the type that in the future you can say, follow what Blackadore did, and then we will know that that is being done properly. We care about this environment. We care about the community. We're interested in the long haul. We're interested in people. These are people who have committed their time, their energy, their effort. They've spent a lot in making the changes. This is a 2-year process. There's been a lot of spend in terms of the changes that we've had to make to the master plan. And I want you to take that very seriously. Just like you, I'm a Belizean. I live here, and I am proud to be a part of this team. And I'd like for you at some point to take it seriously. Don't look at personal agendas and all of that, but look at what is important for you, for your children, and our children's future. Remember, sustainable development has a balance. We also need to eat, right? So then, I look forward to us moving on to the question and answer session in respect, because in the method that we're here and the method we've consulted earlier, we set it up like a circle because we are all equal. It doesn't matter who's putting in the money or not. We're all of equal minds, equal hearts, equal minds, and we want to hear from you individually in a respectful manner because we will always respect all of you. We want to be a part of the community, and we want to hear from you and what it takes to be that. So we will now be introducing you to our team, our expert team that will be coming up to the table to answer any questions that you would like to bring to them. So I'd start off then by inviting Andres Cotreau to come to the table, and he is our architect. He works with the Denison team. Next, Dimos Progastis, he's our project executive. I'd like to now invite Jim Riley. You know him, he's been on the ground and he's passionate and full of love for the people of San Pedro. Actually, he believes he's one of you already, so welcome him. He's our environmental protection. Guadalupe Rosado, he's our local biologist. He has been a part of our environment for quite a long time, and he too is in love and has put together a really great local team. I'd like to invite Juan Rovado, who has invested a lot of time over the past 2 years collecting studies that we will also be able to share with you so that you can also improve the ecology of this entire island and share in the equipment and all of that what we've invested in. Scott Stay, he's our development executive who is serious about the commitment and has given us the ability to make all of these commitments to you. Mark Bueller, Mark is our lead engineer. And then Brian Griffin, who is our electrical engineer, please. And I now turn over back to our moderator. And I would like to thank you for your trust before we continue on this next level.
Thank you, Dr. Chamberlain. During the course of the presentation, I noticed the Minister of Tourism and Civil Aviation walked in, so I'd like to welcome the area representative for Belize Rural South, Honorable Manuel Heredia. Good night, sir. How are you doing? Now we'll go into the question and answer portion of the public consultation. And as I said earlier, this is really a crucial part of the process. As I don't know if some of you may recall, this is the second public consultation with regard to this project. Some of you might have been at the first one, and as you notice, your comments and concerns were taken into consideration, and that's why we're here again. So it's very important that you guys get involved, and you are some of the stakeholders as residents of San Pedro, so it's important that you voice your concerns, if any. Now, before we start with the question and answer session, I just have a few brief guidelines. There are 5 main rules. Please state your name and where you reside and the organization you're affiliated with, if any. Also, please treat each other with the same level of respect you'd like to be treated with. Keep your comments or questions brief and to the point so that we can get everyone's questions or comments in tonight. There's a quite large crowd, so we want to give everyone an equal opportunity to voice any comments or concerns that they may have. Anyone? Looks like everything was crystal clear tonight, so if that's the case, going once, going, oh, gentleman here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Romel Alexander Gomez. I'm a 3rd-generation fly fishing guide. I currently work for El Pescador Lodge, the best lodge in the world. I want to know first and foremost, who is the marine biologist? Do we even have a marine biologist here?
Hello? Yes, there is marine biologist, but she is not present here.
Oh, okay, well, I thought she was supposed to be here. I thought it was important, sorry.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's why I said it. Belize is the first country in the world to make it illegal to kill bonefish, tarpon, and permit. You guys are about to dredge in a marine reserve. This is the only country in the world that protects them. If you're so restorative, why did you forget to mention how you're about to dredge a reserve which my father and my grandfather and all these other gentlemen that have these burn marks like I do have fought for so long to protect? Why is it that you failed to mention that at this meeting?
I will be directing that to Val. Would you like to go ahead?
Okay, thank you very much. That was a disrespectful comment, I believe, in my opinion, because we have a panel of experts, and the team is comprised of an entire team of specialized experts. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's fine, and you're entitled to it. The EIA does outline all the biological work done by the marine biologists. Juan is the lead biologist. Obviously, he is not familiar with every single detail. That's why he has a panel of experts. You have a bird specialist. He consolidates all the science work. He has a general understanding of all the aspects of the different methodologies being carried out by his team of experts. And at the end of the day, in terms of dredging in the protected area, if you look clearly, the scale of development, we're not doing massive dredging in the protected areas to address a lot of the coastal issues. Obviously, if you're trying to do sort of hospitality development like this, there is requirement for access. You know, it's very challenging to have a development like this and not have access. The dredging has been scaled down to a very minimum, right, only to allow for the construction phase of the barges. And Jim will talk a little bit more about the specifics of the dredging. You know, in terms of protected areas are not designed as preservation areas. They are designed to optimize the socioeconomic benefits they have on the communities. We understand very much the sport fishing aspect, but there's a lot of other potential that protected areas have, and they're not established as preservation areas. Even the Holchan Marine Reserve, when it was established, it was very well known that the island, and not only Blackadore, but many other properties within this area are privately owned, and the process respects the right of these property owners. So you want to talk specifically about the dredging?
Good evening. Just to address the dredging question, I'm sorry if you guys, I know you're all working too, so if you came in a little late, there was a slide that Mr. Demos presented that specifically addressed the dredging and the volumes of dredging. It was presented this evening. I believe the number was 8,814 cubic yards. The docks that are proposed for the island itself are specifically located to reduce the dredging to the absolute minimum. And you know, in a traditional design, like you would have all along the borders of San Pedro, each individual home would have their own dock, which would then require more dredging and have more overwater structures. So we looked for a balance. We listened to what you guys had said previously, and we tried to select the places based on the bathrhythmic and hydrographic survey work that we've done and we're continuing to do to locate the areas that would cause the least amount of impact. And during our discussions with the different stakeholder groups, during our outreach, in talking with the different tour guides and the associations and the tour operators, we committed to reducing any of the marine traffic to a certain area and to restrict it so you guys would know where the fishing would be and to not impact all the entire coast where we have access. We're looking to bring the marine traffic from the west coast, from the deep water channel, in through all the deep water, and then the only areas of dredging were directly up against the coastline to make the approach. Okay, does that answer your question for you?
In other words, you're going to dredge no matter what we say.
Well, I didn't say that. I said in the plan that the dredging proposal was for about 8,000 cubic yards, which is a very minimal amount of material if you look at the size of the project.
What guides did you actually talk about? Because as far as we're concerned, there's 14 guides in our lodge, and you have
Well, I'm sorry that you've been directed not to talk to us. We've asked for everybody to come out and talk to us, and we've been told that you guys are not supposed to talk to us. We've approached people directly. We've had meetings in town. This has not been 1 week or 2 weeks. It's been 5+ months. In January, I started with our local engineer the week after the original public consultation in January, and we proceeded through today when we took your boss and Dr. Adams from the BTT out there. So there's no lack of us reaching out. If you guys don't want to talk, we can't make you talk. And we certainly want to hear what you have to say, and we want to respond to it like we have.
Another question. You're going to put a buffer zone on the island, which means that you're putting pretty
What?
much a barricade around our
What?
waters.
Excuse me. What? I don't know what you're referring to in a buffer zone.
Okay, so there's going to be certain areas that we're not going to be allowed to fish.
I don't know who told you that. That's absolutely not true.
Yes,
no
it
one
is.
said that.
So
here.
you're telling me right now we can fish anywhere we want around the
There's-
island. You can
Belizean
guarantee that
law
right now.
says that you guys have access to the
It's a simple
waters
question.
in the
Can you
country.
guarantee us right now that we will be able to fish anywhere around the
You can
island?
fish anywhere you have access to.
All right, then.
Absolutely.
There we-
There's
that's
gonna
all I wanted
be
to
a
hear.
public dock there for people to come and visit there.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Okay. And just, we'll just limit it to 1, maybe 2 questions so that we can give everyone a chance. And then if we have more time afterwards, we can go back to your question if you have any additional.
My name is Omar Arceo. I own Omar's Freelance, and my nickname on the flat is Lords of the Flat. That's how they call me, because I really take care of my expertise and my knowledge that will not, and it was not revealed to no scientist. This I learned it through wisdom and knowledge. My concern that when your consultant was consulting us between January and July came to us, we talk exclusive of the water structure. I am not against the development. I appreciate development. I like your green plan. I mean, that's fantastic. I've never seen it. I will never even dream it. But the water structure is destroying me, destroying my heart, destroying my generation to come, because we inherit this through culture and indigenous people. The water structure that you said that was removed, you're replacing it back on the middle of the island. Where the middle of the island, I can give you exact, almost exact, on the width where you're going to put it is almost maybe, I can say, maybe 600 to 800 feet. On the western side, on the eastern side, you are affecting me there, and I represented also as a member in the Tour Guide Association, where Dion came to us and told us that you have meet together, that you're going to remove the water structure. My concern is the water structure, because the day you put the water structure, you cannot replace back that flat. That flat, you cannot turn it to a reef flat that you're going to see, you're going to enhance it. That's not going to happen. The ramas could work if you lay them off 7 feet out of the water, but it will be hard to grow mangrove there. But to my concern, and my advice will give you, to me, I rather you put the rammers than the structure. So the rammers, when the wave comes and the current comes, will enhance back the beach that you're trying to get. But I agree on that. But I do not agree that you're going to put the water structure. You're not telling us what size of building. It's going to be 2-story building, 10-story building. You're not telling us how big is it. You're not telling us how big is the piers of the jetties. That is my concern. Because the student body that you had here, I think, where are they? I think you need to deal with us, because we are the fathers of the student. We're going to take them the truth and nothing but the truth. I am not respecting you. I'm not against your development. I like your green plan. But the water structure is zero tolerance with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would like to ask for Scott to respond on that one in reference to the.
I thought you were doctor of the flats.
We apologize for that. We apologize for that, Billy, and we will now have Scott respond to Mr. Arceo's question.
Can you hear me? We respect the question and the passion that you gave. And thank you very much for that. And what I can tell you for the over-the-water structures is that over the past 6 months, we looked at what we originally presented in January, which was an extensive outrigger. And we spent the time to determine what was the minimum over-the-water structures that were required so the project was economically viable. And what we showed you today is that minimum. It's been reduced, the total floor area was reduced over 65% to what we showed you in January to where we are today. As far as the stories go, it's 1 to 2 stories. It's not anything greater than that. And the location that we've placed them and the way that we're going to construct them was to be as least impactful to the environment, to the flats, and to help increase the overall marine population. I understand that it's going to impact you, and specifically what you do, and we tried to minimize that as much as possible when we got to this point. And we have to acknowledge that there will be some level of impact. That's the point of this meeting. And so our hope is that when we start to determine the placement of those Rama structures, that we can have much more correspondence directly with you, because it sounds like you have that wisdom and the ideas that would help us. What we showed you today was the idea of it, but we have not shown the exact placement because we want to continue to investigate that before we choose it.
I apologize for that. I didn't mean any disrespect by it. I know you as doctor of the flats. I didn't mean any disrespect by it. Yeah, in terms of the consultation, we have been doing meaningful consultation and we have been respectful of the opinions and vantage points from different stakeholder groups. I know that when we, from the previous EIA to this current EIA, there was an entire process in looking at the outrigger. My colleague Scott already explained about the financial aspect of the over the water structures. We are all in the tourism industry. We know that when people visit our island, they come with a certain expectation, a certain degree of amenities that they expect. This type of development that we're looking here is completely new to this region. You know, the visitor that comes here, you know, they're not competing with any other resort here in Belize, and they come with a certain degree of expectation in terms of amenities, and it was very challenging to look at the over the water structures. At the end of the day, the project commits to abide by all national regulations governing over the water structures. It's scaled down, and even the location of where the current structures are. If you remember, the previous EIA had a clubhouse on the south end. You know, just speaking with the sport fishers, and we're talking about the fly fishers, we're talking of the commercial fishers, we're talking about the recreational reef fishers, and at the end of the day, the areas that we identified was really based on this information because we have the science side of the house, but at the end of the day, we know that we also need to look at traditional knowledge. It's very valuable, and it's even a global move when it comes to science research to look at traditional knowledge and ensure that it influences proper management of the natural resources. So the locations that we are, at the end of the day, we're not going to make everyone happy. There's still going to be people that agree with different components of the project, but the locations that we have are the areas that are least used for the sport fishing.
Thank you. Sir, in the back.
Good night. Hello. Hello. Good night. Billy Leslie, Chair of the Tour Guide Association, Co-Chair of the Ambergris Key Citizens for Sustainable Development. You're all seated there, and the biggest concern of everyone here, fishing guides and everyone, is you using our property, not yours. The water is not yours. That is our concern. I will start with something that I said, because it looks like we're on a repeat of the first EIA. You came and gave the same presentation with some modification. Very little. So I'll start, because as the gentleman said, where's the marine biologist? You know what? He was absent when he was doing his test too. Okay? That island was never a mangrove island. When will you understand that? It was not a Cayo Pájaro, a Cayo Rosario, or a Cayo Bernardo. It was never that. If you look at Blackadore, look at the past, look at the history. It was an island that moved with the different patterns of the wind. North came, the beach was on this side. The southeast came, the beach went on that side. And that is why you have rightfully found that it has mainly strand vegetation, a little bit of littoral forest, some mangrove, and the guy that was doing his coconut plantation. You have found that out, but you don't want to accept the fact, and you want to restore it to a complete mangrove island. Look carefully at your plan. And when you look at those maps, and you look in there, you see a lot of little squares. Plat number 1, plat number 2, plat number 3. You know what's that? Sail. But as Omar has said rightfully, your development, your island, that's fine. Do your there. Our beef, why we get passionate, is because that's what we live on. You are coming to us and wanting to take our water. For what? Look at those structures. It is for private buildings to sell. Tomorrow, all of you are done with your project. That gentleman that says he is the best green guy in the world will take the properties that are built on the marine reserve, sell it, turn his back, and we have to live with it. Then all of the green thing that you talk about will be flushed right there, because none of you will be there. That is why we get passionate, because we're not discussing your island, man. Develop your island any which way you want. That's you. We are here because you're taking our water. You're putting... Dr. Dion, I talked to you so many times, and when I looked at our last meeting and I looked at that EIA and I listened to you tonight, I feel hurt. I feel hurt, Mom, because I respected you. And I'll quote a couple of words that you said because I feel hurt. I am a guy that's passionate with what my kids will live on, what my kids will live on, what these gentlemen are doing today. That's what I get passionate. And I'll quote a few of them. This investor means business. We all know that. It is sell. That's why it means business. That's economic business. I'm quoting your words. This investor means business. And that's what he's doing. Business. He's selling, subdividing that piece of property and land and selling. And bye-bye tomorrow. Quote another one.
Can we go ahead and answer that one first, Mr. Billy, and then we move on to your second question?
Well, give me time because I have a long list. I am a passionate guy, and I made dialogues with you. And it hurts me for you to tell me one day in front of my whole committee, Mr. Leslie, we will remove the outrigger. And you come back and you put other buildings, and it's only a 33% reduction. I get hurt because you're insulting my integrity.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Leslie, can she answer the question? And also, can we keep your questions consolidated? I understand that, sir, and that's fine. But can we keep it focused on the technical aspects of the EIA, please? But she can go ahead and answer, and then you can continue with regards to the technical aspects of the EIA. Thank you.
Thank you for your passion, and thank you for your commitment, because obviously, and one of the things I'd like for you to also discuss is the further discussion that we also had at that consultation, where we discussed an MOU with which we've presented you with some details in terms of how we can make this a relationship that can be good for all parties involved. However, since that still remains a private conversation within the association where we discussed, I'm not going to go through that right now, but I will pass over to Val so that he can talk a little bit more about the investment and the development.
But we welcome the passion, because at the end of the day, we're very appreciative of it, and it's something that is meaningful, and it's something that informs the process. This is not a done deal. This is part of the process. At the end of the day, as we mentioned, not everyone can be happy. There is going to be disagreements, but over the water structures in protected areas is not something new. You have it in the World Heritage Site. You have several protected areas in Belize that have over the water structures because it's part of the access. It's part of the business. It's part of the livelihoods of the people that use the area. What this project commit is to ensure that they are taking extraordinary steps. Especially following the past EIA to ensure that they have compliance with all national regulations that oversee the over the water structures. At the end of the day, the project also commits to develop strengthened partnership with the community groups because even whatever revisions are made or whatever approach is the mic. Yeah, whatever revisions are made or whatever the final plan is, it needs to be coordinated along with the stakeholders to ensure that we address this because the passion, the comments, everything needs to be reflected in the way forward. Your comment about the island never having mangrove, the biological team has confirmed 200 feet offshore doing boreholes. They have confirmed mangrove peat. So mangrove has been an essential part of the natural history of the island. There's a remote sensing study that looks at mangrove coverage across Belize from 1980 to 2010, and even this study does not confirm mangrove in Blackadore, but we have been speaking to some of the generational fishers, and they speak about different stands of mangroves located in Blackadore. At the end of the day, the biology team went over the erosion and the status of the island that, speaks about how the littoral forest, how the mangrove, how all of this has created a negative loop where the vegetation from the island keeps on being depleted. And you want to talk? So, I'd also like to make a point about the over-the-water structures in protected area. This project is bringing meaningful investment to the country of Belize. We're talking about the budget cost of the project being somewhere around 25% of the country's GDP. We are looking at the Holchan Marine Reserve, but Blackadore also sits in the middle of this seascape. We have the Corozal Bay Wildlife Sanctuary to the north and the Bacalar Chico National Park and Marine Reserve located just adjacent to this project. What we must realize that all of these protected areas, require resources for them to be managed effectively. Holchan is one of the few protected areas in Belize and the region that could be considered self-sustainable, but all of the other protected areas that we have suffer from resources to ensure that they do the kind of effective management that is required to maintain the biodiversity of these protected areas, but to also provide socio-economic opportunities for the communities. This project, although it's looking at the over-the-water structure, it's a new development. It's a development that is taking extraordinary measures to ensure that it's ecologically sound, and at the end of the day, the over-the-water structures are still considered an essential part of the hospitality aspect of the island.
Good night to everyone. And this is not a question, but just a few comments based that I have been part of this project from the concept initiative, which in government we have what we call an investment committee that is made up of 5 ministers, our technical people, and we look at the concept plan, we give our input, returns to cabinet for cabinet briefing, and then it has been going for a while until it reaches to the point where it is today. I must say also that talking about, I think, I regard him as a family and Romy son. Because this reserves wouldn't be there if it was not for my strong support together with Billy Leslie and other stakeholders over here in the industry. But again, it was clearly said that from day one, before the reserve was created, that there are private islands, there are private properties that are around these areas. And we cannot, if we stop development, it's like committing suicide. I agree that there has to be a balanced development, and that is exactly in the Ministry of Tourism what we have done. We have created our first ever sustainable tourism master plan that will guide development. There is nothing in this world that can happen if it's not balanced. The economics,
and the conservation part of it. And this is one project, not to defend the investor, but this is one project that I believe that has far exceeded any other EIA that has been done in this country, any other project. If there are hoteliers over here, I'm sorry to say that the way you have done your resorts, I mean, you have created a lot more damage than what it will be cost over here. And then again, I must say that the bonefish and the tarpon and the permit, again, Ali, it was an initiative that I supported. And I will continue to support whatever results. If we recall very well, all those shovels over there were sold, you know. It is my initiative as your representative that I had to fight cabinet to make sure that we can acquire back again in exchange of something else. And that is why today we have all the shovels and all the inner lagoons that are conservation areas because of my initiative. This one with the shovels and it was almost thrown behind behind our back, because in cabinet other people were saying, yes, you want to protect over there, but what about our other areas? That is, other ministers that represent on the other side of the San Pedro over there say, we have fishermen that fish over there. What about them? Why are you taking so much? Why then our fishermen will not be? So finally we got it through, but it was an effort between tour guides, and I have seen this project being walked. Billy, I have a lot of respect, but then we had this meeting just a few days ago with the leadership of the Tour Guides Association, and we were walked through the entire thing, and what they presented today is exactly what was presented to us that night over there. Over the water structure, there is legislation that covers that. I totally agree what you said, that the water belongs to all of us, but again, we have to remember it belongs to all of us, but there are people that govern how it's supposed to be used. When you will build up here, you have to seek permission. You cannot just go ahead, even though if it was free for all, then you just go and do what you want. But there are people, and that is government, that has regulation and guidelines that will govern how it. And again, my job as your representative is to protect you, the tour guide, the tour operators, the contractor, the laborer, the students that graduate that are looking for jobs. So we have to look at the negative part, the positive part, and at the end of the day, come with a conclusion that will be in the best interest of the country. It is not only our island. Yes, I am from here and I will protect it, but our job is to protect and enhance the livelihood of all the people of Belize. And I can totally believe that if we do, there is nothing impossible in this life once you do it right, and if you do it the right way. And then development and conservation definitely has to go together, but one cannot survive without the other. So with this comment, I am telling you that government has walked through all the steps that they have to do. Yes, we have to do the EIA, listen to everybody concerned and try to address it as best as possible. But there has to be a give and take in anything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll get back to you, Mr. Leslie. We have a gentleman here. But we want to give everyone an opportunity. Okay. Sure. Go ahead. No, sir. I wanted to give everyone an equal opportunity, but the gentleman has deferred to you. So go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir. It's all yours.
All I'm saying is that it seems that we are still going back over and over the same thing. The panel maybe is not listening or chooses not to listen. There isn't anybody here that's upset with your development. In fact, you could get everybody to raise their hands for your development. We're here discussing that you want to use an area that shouldn't be used. Then what will that president show? Okay, then the next gentleman will build a house on the reef. That's water. He could build it there. That is what we're going to is. We are here because you are wanting to place over the water structures. And in our dialogue, we were told and we walked away happy and saying, you know what, we love you, we love you. The outrigger is off. Then they come back. Anyhow, the EIA process that we have is to identify who is using it and how it will affect it, and that's why we're here. That's part of the process, so allow us to express ourselves.
Sir,
Okay?
you're well within your rights. Go ahead.
If the developer is real serious about being green and how to show the rest of the world to use it as an example, because that's what has been presented to us. If that developer is that way, I have a couple suggestions of how this will make him the best guy. Point number one, remove the over-the-water structures that are for either rent or sale. We understand you have to access your place, and we have agreed to those. We understand that. But you have buildings that are for sale and for rent. And the law states 1 story. Your guys are talking 2 stories, so you are breaking the law. Secondly, continue the dialogue with the stakeholders. Don't step on them. Val, respect our opinions, Val. That doesn't make us wrong. 3, don't interfere with the sport fishers and the commercial fisher that use that portion of the marine reserve. Yes, and the minister is right. With all of our efforts, we made that whole area what it is today. But let us continue and make sure that when our kids take it, it is not a big mess. 4, take a clear look at the idea of the reef enhancement. A reef enhancement? There's no reef back there. The area is popular for bonefish, tarpon, and especially the permit. Yet, we're going to create areas to have green striped grunt, sergeant majors, and a few snappers. That has no economic value to these gentlemen that are fishing the bonefish, the tarpon, where people are spending millions of dollars to come here. That is why we're that way. Because you are asking to use the water. When we met the last time, we were told, go back and look at the EIA. We have adjusted it. We couldn't answer to that. We have to go back and look at it before we answer. Because if we did, we'd be answering out of somebody else's idea. And that is why, when coming here today, I get shocked and I looked at it. It's a 33% reduction. That doesn't cut it. Over the water structures for rent or lease, we don't want to give up that patrimony for someone's personal economic gain. If we're going to give up the patrimony, then give half of that sale to the Marine Reserve to manage it right. Because you're going to sell it. That's the only reason. That's why we're here, and that's why we get passionate about it. If it was something that it was a necessity, like your dock, your service dock, and we have agreed with you, yes, you have to do that, and yes, you have done the best to show us to minimize the damage. The buildings for rent or lease, you're killing me, man. You're killing me.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much for the passion that you brought again, Mr. Leslie. I'm a bit surprised that you say that we did not tell you about the 33% because we did discuss that, and the minister and many of your members were here last week, Wednesday night, while we discussed, and we actually provided the percentages along with you. Again, you would say that we were not having the meaningful dialogue, and we do really want to have that, but I'm not sure if you realize that this project will not be financially viable should we not provide or do the overwater structures at this juncture. So despite the fact that you've mentioned that you want the project to go ahead, basically you're saying that you don't want it to go ahead because we're unable to make it a viable project unless we're able to do that. It's a 2-mile island and there's minimal development while the restorative process is going on. Maybe we can discuss further what you've mentioned. I'll pass it on to Scott.
I'd like to add to that. And, when we say that it needs to be economically viable, for any development that needs to happen. And that's also the main reason why the majority of developments do not achieve a restorative nature. They're not environmentally friendly. They destroy the environment for capitalistic reasons. This project is costing exponentially more than any other development because of its restorative nature. And when we look at the island, which is the main purpose of restoring the island, there's only so much of the island that can be developed without preventing the restoration. And we also took very much into account your strong feelings about the over-the-water structures. And we did reduce it. Now, I understand we didn't reduce it to a point that is acceptable to you. We recognize that. It was a 33% reduction in overall area, but then its square footage of buildable area, it was a 65% reduction in size. That's the most that we can reduce it without putting at risk the project financially working, which means it won't happen. But let's look at the end result of this development. When it's complete, there's a new revenue stream to your country that's 400 million Belize dollars over the first 20 years of operation. It will create 300 temporary construction jobs and up to 1,000 permanent jobs. Those permanent jobs are entry level, they're managerial level and executive level that are for everyone within this community. And so we understand that it will be going into the water. It is not a precedent-setting thing. We started this project before Blackadore was in the Marine Reserve, but we still recognize the Ho Chan Marine Reserve, we respect it, and we've done our best to reduce that impact.
Thank you. Another question? This gentleman here. This gentleman had asked before here. Yes. Just stand up, sir, so you can bring the mic to you.
My name is Everett Anderson. I sit on the board member of the San Pedro Tour Guide Association, and I also sit on the board member of the Tour Operator Association. My views and comments is my personal, is not representing none of the association, which I am part of. Okay. I feel and I share the same sentiments as my fellow board member, Billy, and all the other fishermen. Okay. The biggest problem here is that, and there is an old say here, once you get bit by a snake, you see a lizard and you run. We have been abused by other development, and it still happens here. I live in this real world. At the end of the day, things will get done. For far, and I know a lot of people can second me, this development has shown the best presentation, even the best intention than other developments. I look at the social value of it and also at the environmental value. It takes us a while to gain trust from development, okay? But if it will happen, and it will be happen over our national water, which is part of a national reserve, I believe that that marine reserve should be compensated. Compensated is a trust fund, or you can open a trust fund. Put financing into that trust fund and have board members, or if you make a board members from different organizations here that are looking after the conservation and protection of our natural resources. I know in the DOE, under the over-the-water structure, there is annual fees that goes to government. I don't want to step on no one's feet, but 6.5 dozen are the same. There are companies, petroleum companies in Africa that return back to their community, to the country, but through the government. And the villagers or the local people that is in that area seldom receive what they're supposed to receive when their country is getting exploited. I believe that if you open a trust fund that will deal directly with the local community that it will be affected, okay, help with the education, help with the fishermen, help with natural disasters, then I would agree on over the water structure. But if there is no compensation for the local area, I will not agree on over the water structure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Scott, I'd like for you to take that comment because it really wasn't a question.
First of all, thank you for very thoughtful and well-articulated comments. We respect the reserve, and we understand that this project's going to tax the resources that the reserve currently has in its policing, in its oversight, and in its protection of that area. So your suggestion where finding a delicate balance to that is something that we're willing to do, in that we know that we're going to be putting the limits of the resources that the Whole Chain Reserve has and being able to help assist to increase that, as well as the educational component to it, is certainly something that we want to help aid.
I would just like to reflect on two national policies. We have the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan that identifies Blackadore as an area suitable for development. Now, this is a plan that has been recently endorsed by the government, and it looks at coastal zone areas as areas that you need to look at a diversity of ecosystems to be able to manage it in a way that it does not affect the integrity of the ecosystem, but that they continue providing sustainable development for communities. Because at the end of the day, we cannot completely lock off all our resources. Where are the jobs going to come from? Where are the ecosystem services that people depend from? How are we going to optimize the benefits that these areas provide? The National Protected Area System Plan as well looks at protected areas in this manner. It does not look at them as preservation areas. And it's the same thing. You need to ensure that the integrity of these natural resources to continue to provide these services is not affected, but maximizing the social and economic benefits that they provide for the communities and for the country. The recent revision to the Protected Area System Plan also looks at the need to ensure that these resources continue to contribute to sustainable national development, because the country is in a state that people need jobs, right? And the natural resources are being affected by a host of other factors. Here in San Pedro, we see developers come by, we see the EIA process unfold. People are clearing mangroves, people are affecting the ecosystem. This is the first development that I'm aware of that comes and presents a plan that looks at restoring mangroves. They're willing to restore mangroves, and we're opposing that, At the end of the day, something that we also need to recognize is that this developer is committed, right? They recognize that they're in the middle of this seascape, and they are going to be investing in resources that contribute to the effective management of the protected areas. Holchan, again, is one of the self-sustainable protected areas, but our entire system of protected areas has a financial gap. For all our protected areas in Belize to be managed at a basic level, you're talking about somewhere around $20 million that the government or the co-managers need to find from somewhere to be able to manage these protected areas. It's not happening. Here you have a development that the budget is investing, what was the figure, $400 million? Over $400 million into this seascape, into this community. And we're going to say no. Right? This developer is taking extraordinary measures to ensure that this is as ecologically sound as possible, and that it becomes a responsible development that does not affect the integrity of the resources. But at the end of the day, there has to be some give and take. Not everyone is going to be happy. You know, not everyone is going to agree. There's going to be some disagreements, but what's important to take home is that this is a willing developer, and the developer has a plan and is looking to strengthen this partnership going forward with all the community organizations, including the Hulchal Marine Reserve and the other partners of the Seascape, which is the SACD. We're talking about the Fisheries Department. We're even talking about the Kikakor, the principals of the Kikakor Marine Reserve. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Oh, okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Elito Arceo, thank you for your presentation. I want to reiterate what some people have said here tonight. You know. We're not against you developing on your island. It's the over-the-water structures that we have a problem with. In the entire EIA, only one paragraph was actually mentioned Solchan. And it says, if you give me 1 minute, I'll read it. Blackadore Key is part of the newly declared extension of the Holchan Marine Reserve, and as such, is subject to protection according to the different zone schemes of the Marine Reserve. And just to finish on that, it says, somebody said a comment earlier, doing overwater structures solely so that a project is economically feasible is illegal and immoral. Our national guidelines state that structures must be kept to a minimum, not done so that developers can make money out of it. Another question is, earlier in the presentation, what power does Blackadore Key have to tell the citizens of this country about the 66-foot Queensland? What power do you have? That 66-foot covers the entire island, not a place that you can designate for us. It is against the law to build an overwater structure in the Holchan Marine Reserve. You want to build more structures? Buy the neighboring island. It's big enough. There's their key. There's other islands you can buy. Do not build any over the water structures in that reserve that this whole community depends on for a living. Thank you.
Thank you. You have the gentleman over here.
I
sorry.
believe that we should. I don't believe that a question was asked. It was mainly comments. So
yeah,
can we
it
get
seemed
another
there was more of a
question?
comment.
I think there was a gentleman over there that has
Yes.
been waiting for quite a while.
Yes, he's next.
Hello. Only one thing. Do two members from the BTIA, they agree if they get a portion of the money. So we come back to like how I told the representative of Blackadore, Pescador this evening. Everything in this world now is about money. So if you give them a portion of money, go ahead. It's okay. If you don't give us, you can't. That's wrong. They speak for that little group there that's fly fishers. But what about us, the commercial fishermen? This is also killing a lot of the culture of this country by us. I myself, as a commercial fisherman, they're trying to, you can't catch a bonefish. So the delicacy of this, a lot of you people, fish meat balls, you can't eat it no more. And I guarantee that most of these fishermen, they can afford to take it home and eat it because nobody will watch at them because they trust on them so much. I was once caught with couple bonefish. One of the same person that took it said, man, I'm going to eat my bonefish today. So, if this young lady here wants to eat a bonefish, she can't but they can't because they go fishing. Why don't we work together? You know, this is not only about them, but also about us. Let's do this sustainable. The same way we have an open season for conchs and lobster, fine, let's do it in one way that I can also benefit out of it, not only them. We all need to eat, not only them. That's my concern.
Thank you for your comments, sir. We have no other. We have one more.
Good night. My name is Shelley Huber. I'm a businesswoman in San Pedro. I was probably one of the first, together with the group of pioneers in San Pedro. I started to work in this industry from when I was 12 years old. You know, places and people, and they have come and gone. But I live in a community here where you buy your land, and not because I like my neighbor's land, I will build on my neighbor's land. And I would like to know how many acres of land the gentleman has, and why is he not building on his land, and why you all there are saying all of the expense and all of the monies and all of this stuff, why he does not build on the land. I cannot go and build on my neighbor's land. Thank you.
He has a comment that he wanted to make.
You mentioned about the acres. It's 96 acres in the first survey, which I believe was 2004.
Correct.
Yeah, we're talking about 104 acres. So, at the end of the day, what this project is committed, again, is to abide by all the regulations that govern over the water structures. We're working very closely with the regulatory agents and even the Holchan Marine Reserve. And I think earlier the financial aspect of the over the water structure was already mentioned. And again, I reiterate that we're all in the tourism industry. We all know that when people come to a lodge, when people come to a hotel, when, you know, depending whatever the business is, people come with a certain degree of expectation in terms of the amenities that they expect. And in terms of the development that we have at Blackadore, we're talking about a different scale of developer and a different level of people that visit this area. And, you know, it just so happens that the over the water structure becomes an essential part of the development.
Thank you.
Never brought you a marine biologist. But when you're talking about 20 years of $400 million, the flat of Belize has annual and economic value of more than $100 million. So we're going to sacrifice 1 year of $100 million to wait for 20 years to put $400 million? Come on, do your maths better.
Thank you. Well, it seems we have no further questions or comments. With that being said, I'd like to thank all of you all for coming out.
I have a comment that I'd like to make in reference
Okay.
to that. Mr. Arceo, I think that at this point, we also need to make sure that the audience, like you mentioned, it's our children that are here as well. And 100 million is the entire flats for the entire country of Belize. Flats for 8,867 square miles. At Blackadore, because of your concern, and I wanted to show Billy how serious I am about this, we actually created a logging system to verify how many boats are coming near the island to flat fish. Over the past 6 months, we have taken down a log, and there has only been 10 or less boats per month that have been logged that are coming to Blackadore. And the reason why they don't come to Blackadore, because I again pursued going out and finding out from the fishermen, why don't you come around the waters? First of all, the waters are very rough. unlike the other shoals that they traverse very often. Besides that, the cost of the fuel to get to Blackadore is prohibitive to them. So they will go to the shoals at every other location before choosing the flats at Blackadore because of the high cost, because of the roughness of it and the experience that is gotten. Let's not give up revenue for this country around 2 or less miles of flats, which we are not restricting you from. You will still gain access to that. For 400 million, which is over 1,000 jobs. Right now, our unemployment rate is over 29%. And for youth and for women, it's over 35%. So I'm speaking passionately as a woman and as an advocate for youth at this point. We have to realize as a country that we have to be the change that we want for equal opportunity for our girls and not only for our boys. And women need jobs too. We need managerial jobs. We need jobs where we're taken seriously. We need training opportunities. We need exposure. We need experience. And we need for a mindset shift to occur within this country where we understand when something is being provided, yes, something is often given back because in life there is no free lunches. Employment. The cycle of crime is rising within our country. It's an escalating social ill situation. We're being seen very negatively in the international environment. We have turned away many bona fide investors who have tried to come to this country. And we are supporting investors who don't even live in our country, who just repatriate the funds back to their international bank accounts. This is going to be bought locally. They're going to be using our services. They're going to be coming to your restaurants. In fact, they've actually impacted this economy heavily already. There will be an investment in education and in schools. And I want to tell you, and this is the last statement I want to make right now, if you all think that the cost of education is expensive, consider the cost of ignorance at this point. And there's no reason to believe in me, but I want you all to realize today, you are deciding on the future of 316,000 people across the length and breadth of this country. You may say that it's only for San Pedranos, but look in every one of your hotels and every one of your restaurants. Your tour guides, your waiters, your waitresses, your cleaners are from Punta Gorda, they're from Dangriga, they're from Independence, they're from all over this country. Votech schools are investing heavily in trade, in technical shifts, because no longer are traditional education worthwhile. It's really what you know how to do. Green technology is the way to go. We are given an opportunity. Consider it. Don't listen to me. Like Buddha says, only listen to what prescribes to you and your values. Focus on your children. Focus on the youth. Don't be personally driven and personally directed. At the very end of all of this, this is about 316,000 of us. Not a few people who may definitely, not that it's not valuable, just that if you are only interested in fishing for fun, in my country, we fish for food and we make Johnny cake and fry the fish when we're done. And that's what the kind of country that I want to live in. And this is not on behalf of Blackadore. I am speaking on behalf of Dion Chamberlain Miranda, who has invested 46 years of her life in this country, never left to leave and never moved to another country because my passion, my life resides here. Thank you very much. And like I said, this is not on behalf of Blackadore. This is on behalf of me. And I just hope that you take that with the sincerity and the honesty with which I presented here today.
Ma'am, just a clarification there, ma'am. I have these fishing guides here, and they can attest to you that the information you received was not correct. The reason they don't go there, you and I discussed it already, when your caretaker was chasing people out with their guns, okay? That's one of the reasons. It is not that. Let me finish now, okay? Let me finish. We are here because we chose to protect this area on behalf of all of the 316,000. We chose that, okay? We chose that. We protected that for our kids.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Excuse me, sir. Hold on 1 second, sir. Sir,
Just a comment.
Sir, okay, you
Just a
will have an
comment.
opportunity to comment. Just let me
Okay, I
reiterate.
just want to comment.
I
was on
understand,
Blackadore
sir. Hold on.
on
Give me a
Thursday.
second to say something,
Just
sir.
on Blackadore,
Sir, you will have your
Thursday,
opportunity to comment. I
pictures
just
of
asked.
5 votes.
I just
that
want to.
same day, I got proof. Or just on that same day, there was over 5 votes when I went to Blackadore on Thursday. So I know what kind of law you're keeping, man.
Okay, thank you, sir. I want to reiterate that we are to address each other with the same respect that you want given to you. Sir, earlier you had a... Sir, the mayor would like to speak.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I want to thank you guys for coming to this very, very good consultation. But first, I think we're jumping the gun. We need sustainable development, and that's what we're going for. Talking about fly fishermen only, I have been the president of the San Pedro Tour Guides, and I have been more than fair to represent the snorkelers, the fishermen, and every single person that works on that water. It's about deep sea fishing, it's about snorkeling, it's about fly fishing, it's about beachcombing, it's about everything. And the Blackadore, what they're opening is the doors, they're opening our eyes. We need to appreciate and learn at their expense. This is something big internationally, you know. We have to be careful. I think Ms. Dion said it right. This is only San Pedro, you know. We have to look at Belize, the country, the entire populace of this country, which are our brothers and sisters working on all the hotels, bars, and restaurants. Rightly, like I think Roger mentioned, we have to look at the commercial fishermen. We have to look at the housekeepers, the plumbers, the electricians, the attorneys, every student that was here. They have that right to study, to get a career. They can turn to be marine biologists. We cannot just say no every time and the same group again. I respect you, Billy. I respect you, Billy. I respect you. You guys, no, but hold on. Hold on. You guys are saying, hold on. You guys are saying that you are not against the project and you want to reach a compromise. You rightly say it. No. Hold on. I appreciate everything you guys are doing, you know. But you guys, you're not looking at the big picture. You are not, Omar. You're not. I'm sorry. It's the same old 4 or 5 people talking all the time. Omar, if the San Pedro Tour Guide Association, over 300 members are interested, they would be here also commenting. But what I'm saying is this, Omar, you're saying you're not against Blackadore. Elito had mentioned where's the 66-foot reserve. He can get his attorneys, and that will not win that case because the island does not measure that amount. So they will have the right to construct. Government, whether it's a UDP or PUP government or ILP, they sold the islands, they sold the atolls, so they sold everything. People have to invest because that's what they bought it for. Who will buy an island and not invest and not develop it? You have to realize, no, hold on. You have to realize that you have your personal agenda. That cannot be accepted. We have to welcome investment in this country. I'm telling you guys, I'm not against you, but you have to open your eyes. You have to. I mean, you know Blackadore Key just like I do. I know Blackadore Key very, very good. Blackadore Key had mangrove. Blackadore Key was not all erosion. Blackadore Key, a lot of the local people took the black soil, the white sand, the palms, the coconut trees, and sold it to the different hotels here on this island. I tell you because I witnessed that. And the rocks also, you add one more. But you guys are trying to be negative. Open your eyes, listen. This thing about over the structure, you guys are saying you are against over the structure, so that means I have the full support on canceling all the overstructured dive shops, bars, everything on the island. You see, well, that's good. I like that, and I love you guys. You know, don't take Don't take it against me. I'm just trying to get what you guys are thinking. You see? Huh? So you have to be careful. We have an opportunity here and we should not let it go. Billy, as a good friend, Omar, I hope you guys don't get mad at me, but we need to sit down and reach to a compromise. We have to. I mean, there's no way out for us here. This will bring a lot of money. Do not think only on the fly fishing, you know. I always mention that. That Blackadore Key, when it opens, it will require divers. It will require employment. Maybe your daughter, maybe my daughter, our grandchildren will be working there. But you guys are just saying no, no, no to every time there's a consultation. Why you don't see Pepe Garcia here? He's tired of seeing the same 4 or 5 people. We have to be. No, I know. I love my island. I love my island, Billy. But that's what I'm saying. But we have to reach a compromise. That's not reaching a compromise because they're building on their island. To you. To you. Billy. To you, Billy. Yeah, but hey, what percentage is this group in the entire San Pedro and the entire country of Belize?
When you go to the radio tomorrow, you will hear the rest of people that didn't want to come. What do you think the school kids left?
No, I don't agree with you guys. You guys. But anyway, there are my friends, but I tell you, do not get discouraged. Continue the job because we need to work together. We need to move forward. The island need investments, need jobs, and I will encourage that we start cleaning our backyards also first. Because if you are thinking about those, the dredging and the piers out there, we have a lot here. We need to clean our backyard to protect the environment because we are not doing our proper share. And you know guys that very well. I keep telling you, let's clean La Isla Bonita. I keep telling you guys, we need to get our act together first before we even go farther, you know. And so we have to do that. No, I agree with you. I like that. Actually, I like that. I like that. But anyway, what I want to tell you before I leave, what I want to tell you, this is not only about fly fishing. This is not only about that. This is about every job, every career you can think of. That's all what I want to tell you guys. Think about it twice. I'm not against you guys. You have given your comment. I am giving my one. Just respect each other. But let us think positive. Let us think positive and do not stay on that track.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen. Gentlemen, your impassioned concerns are appreciated. This is what the public consultation process is about. We just want you to operate and exercise the same level of respect that you all asked for as well. Given that we have no more questions, no more comments, the suggestion box is in the back. So for those of you who haven't been able to voice your comments or concerns, you can always put it in the suggestion box. Thank you all for such a great, well-attended consultation. Have a very blessed night. Good night.